Steve, are you good? The January 9th, 2021 special meeting of the Scottsdale Unified Number 48 Governing Board will come to order at 8:21 a.m. Vice President Snowski, please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
There will be a roll call starting from the chair's right.
Zach Lindsay.
Libby Hartwells.
Patty Beckman.
Julie Sanowski.
Jan Michael Greenberg. All board members are present and there is a quorum. We will now move to agenda item 4, workshop centered on developing a high-performance board superintendent leadership team. Dr. Menzel.
Thank you, President Greenberg, Vice President Sanowski, and members of the Governing Board, and I appreciate your willingness to come out on a Saturday morning to participate in this conversation. Today we will be joined by Dr. Steve Joel, who was the search consultant that assisted the district in finding the superintendent, so that's why I'm here. And I know he's had a lot of time to work with the Scottsdale community and getting to know the district, the governing board members. He hasn't had the opportunity to spend as much time with our 3 new board members, but as much as we would have loved to have him here in person, that wasn't possible. And I think if I was in Nebraska, I would want to be in Scottsdale too in person. But I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Joel. I appreciate his friendship and the support that he's provided to our district, and I'm looking forward to a great morning today with all of you.
Thank you, Dr. Menzel, and good morning, everyone. And I would echo what Dr. Menzel just said. It's 29 degrees. We still have snow on the ground from a storm last week, and many times I've thought, boy, I just want to be in Scottsdale. But I am excited for you, and I'm excited for your kids, and I'm excited for your community. This was not an easy search, as John Michael and Patty both know, and I'm sure that the new board members were paying attention to as well. In fact, it was probably one of the toughest ones I've done, and I've done more than 100 of them across the country of all various sizes and shapes. But your future's bright. I think always we see when a new superintendent is brought in that there is an opportunity now to cast a new direction, and certainly I think that's why you're here this morning, and that's what I hope to facilitate. I've done this type of facilitation a lot. I told Dr. Menzel yesterday, or I told Jan Michael yesterday. We just had a quick phone call about expectations. That I like this better than the superintendent search, because this is really a launching pad for your work together to really take the next big steps for your community. And boy, did we hear from teachers and community members and non-certified folks, about the challenges that are in Scottsdale. So things are not going to get fixed overnight, as you know. I mean, you brought in a new superintendent in the midst of a pandemic. No easy chore. But I think when all's said and done, you're going to come out of this, as we heard many times as we talk to people, we want to get back to what Scottsdale used to be and was known for, one of the top school districts in America. So that's our challenge, and I'm excited to be a part of it. Thank you for bringing me back in, and I'll look forward to today, and then reflections that you take part in moving forward. So if I get that first slide, please. And just let me know when you have it, because I'm not seeing anything on my screen. It says agenda.
The slide deck is now up. Next slide.
Okay, I think you have the wrong one. I sent you another one, Jonathan, I thought. The materials that you have are the information pieces that I'm going to assume you had a chance to look at. I do have other materials that are going to work us through some exercises. Did everybody, Dr. Menzel, get an opportunity to fill out the personality profile?
Yes, indeed, they did.
Okay, excellent. Because we're going to have a little bit of fun to kind of break the ice.
So Jonathan doesn't have a different slide deck, Dr. Joel, than the one we're seeing here.
Okay, so all right, let me do this. I'm just going to kind of, let me just go through off my slide. There's nothing in here that's pertinent. I want to spend some time on the personality styles, and then I'll go back in and send them the right slide deck. So let me tell you that the agenda for today is we're going to talk about what it takes really to work together to become a high performing unit. I've got some information in there we'll go over very quickly, just things that I've pulled together about, what separates the really good school districts from the districts that struggle the most. And in America right now, there are a lot of school districts that are in turmoil for a lot of different reasons. We'll talk about roles and responsibilities. I also have a lot of really good scenarios to work school board trustees through, but I don't know that we'll have time for that because we do want to set strategic priorities for the rest of this school year and with Dr. Menzel. So let me tell you that I have some assumptions whenever I work with a board. One is that there is a desire amongst all of you today and going forward in the future to produce positive results for students and working with your superintendent. I mean, that's absolutely essential and key that your intentions are centered on kids and centered on outcomes and results. And that you recognize that effective working relationships take great effort and, they're not easy to develop and they're certainly not easy to sustain. And that Dr. Menzel is working very hard to be the superintendent that Scottsdale needs to improve schools and meet the needs of the board and the community. And then conversations today will be candid and sincere and above the table with a commitment to not go under the table. And let me explain that for a second. I've done a lot of work on the dynamics of people who come together. Synergy is two or more people come together to work and collaborate. And one of the big challenges that we have is that if conversations amongst the team are not above the table, meaning where everybody has the ability to hear what's being said, then what happens to teams is they get sabotaged by what happens under the table. And so I talk an awful lot about, the folks that I work with, that you have to, if you have issues and concerns, they need to be candid, they need to be brought forward. There can't be sidebar water cooler, not that we have water coolers anymore, conversations where people are having to try to address things in private, that your superintendent and your colleagues need to know what you're thinking and what you're saying, and if you're not willing to say it to them, you should not be willing to say it to anybody out, either in the community, on the staff, or even to each other. And we'll talk some more about that. And then you're here for the right reasons. I'd like to ask you to, not have political agendas if you can avoid that. And I know we live in a very politically charged environment right now, but politics and education, while we have to co-align, they can create great conflict and deep chasms when that is what is driving the work that we're doing. So with that, let's get to work. And so you have the personality styles. So what I'd like to do is, have you totaled those up?
Yes.
So you should have totals in columns.
Has everybody totaled their columns up? Okay, all the totals have been calculated.
Excellent. All right. So let me talk about this. This is a fun thing, right? So what we know about each of us is we're all different. Everybody's different. And it doesn't matter what environment we're working in, if we don't understand who we are and we don't understand who the people that we're working with are, then over time, and it doesn't take very long, we begin to put up defenses, right? So, for example, if I were to say to you, how many of you are firstborn?
Firstborn.
So, we know that there's research on firstborn, right? Research on firstborn is, boy, parent pleasers, a little bit of a perfectionist, driven to succeed, constantly trying to show their parents that they've really done something with their life, right? And, those of you that are parents and, you understand that, that firstborn makes it pretty easy for us. But then comes number two, and then, boy, if we have a third, it's quite a bit different. So, because we think we're great parents after the firstborn, and we naturally let our guard down with the secondborn, because if it worked with number one, why won't it work with number two? So who's the secondborn in the family? All right, so, and keep your hand up if you're two of two. All right, so let me talk about two of two first. Two of two is, as the research is really pretty clear, you're going to be the rebel. You're going to be the person that challenges authority. And part of the reason for that is that you watch the firstborn, the perfectionist, who got a lot of accolades for the work that they did, but they were also stressed out a lot. They were constantly striving to succeed, and you realize pretty quickly, psychologically, of course, that you're going to have more fun with the things that you do, and you're going to give your parents gray hair, and you're going to do all the things that the firstborn didn't dare do, and it's going to make your parents better parents. And once they figure out that we got two kids that are completely different, how in the world did that happen? And then we have the middle child. Who's the middle child? Okay, so you're the master negotiator. You're the one that's caught in the middle, and sadly, the firstborn is the one that parents are trumpeting as the next great thing to come out of the family unit. The baby of the family is getting all their attention because parents recognize pretty quickly that they are that this is it for them. Once 3 or 4 leaves, it's now it's senior citizenship on the horizon, and the middle child has to find their own way, and and they do, and they can be very successful, or they can go on their own. So quite often, what we see in the middle child is that independent spirit that they develop on their own. So I say this to you not to give you, but you can read the research on birth order, but it's just that is an example of the differences that exist within even our own families, right? And depending upon the family structure, we can make things can be easy, they can be complex, they can be complicated, but every family dynamic is challenged by different personality styles. And so it's very, very natural to have that. How many, those of you that are married, who married somebody exactly like themselves? The research on that really pretty clear, right? Why is that? Why? I mean, probably now, I've been married 44 years. I think my wife would probably say, boy, I wish I would have married somebody a little bit more like me. We're polar opposites. And, she gets it and I get it, and you probably get it too, right? The reality of it is in our lives, if we surround ourselves with people that are exactly like us, there is no growth that occurs. And that's the same thing about you as an individual coming into this environment, and also, trying to find your way as a contributing member of the Board of Trustees. And so that's what this is intended to do. Is just, number one, point out our differences, but secondly, to really show that when you bring yourself into this room, into this environment with the challenges in front of you, working together, leveraging your strengths, with an understanding that as a unit you become much stronger, the reality of it is that's when you become high performing. But if you allow yourself to be turned off by somebody who views the world differently than you do, or processes information differently than you do, what happens is those gaps and those disagreements then become much more severe. And I'll tell you, the work of public education today challenges this almost on a daily basis. So it's really incumbent upon you and all of us to continue to work on this. So with that, let's have a little bit of fun here, and I want to ask that you indulge me and not get offended by some of the things that I'm going to show. So let's start with this. Who is the column 3? Who's got the strongest number in column 3? All right. So here's who you are. You're control people. By the way, you're a taskmaster. You can put that up on the top. Taskmaster. You like control. You are very, very confident people. You have an incredibly strong work ethic. You like to take risks. You're highly competitive. You have a tendency in organizational structures to be looked at as a leader. And you seek out leadership opportunities. You're politically wise. You're very decisive. You don't see a lot of gray areas in things, right? So it's either yes or no. And I would ask the two that raised their hand on that column, if you had children, how many times did you say to your children, what part of no don't you understand? Right? So there is no negotiation with the taskmaster. It's, this is it. You made your case? No. That, I will tell you, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, in the business leadership model, these were the CEOs of the companies. Because if you couldn't demonstrate that in a psychological inventory, you weren't going to rise or get promoted in an organization. So you had to be the kind of person that could fire somebody pretty quickly and not worry about it, not lose any sleep over it. When you walk through a room, people look at you, they pay attention, and they think, okay, somebody's about to get it now. Let's kind of see what's going on. So you have a very intimidating way of you can have a very intimidating way about yourself. Of course, the president's company excluded. So as a taskmaster, you like to be in charge, and you want things to happen quickly, because with you, it's really the let's get it done. We have a task in front of us. Let's get it done. And sometimes you're going to get frustrated with people in the room that are going to want to go slower. They're going to want more information. They're going to want more dialogue and discussion. And you're looking at the whole plethora of challenges, and you just want to, how are we going to get to number 10 if we don't take care of number 1 and number 2? So that's going to be you. You're going to be impatient. And, we accept that because, quite frankly, you're great to have on a team because you are so action-oriented. So here's things that other people are going to look at, and they're going to say, all right, it can be a little bit of a turn-off to us. One, you tend to be a little bit too aggressive. Things are going to happen much more quickly with you. The people that are taskmasters are not the best listeners in the room. They have to work at listening, and many of you have. You wouldn't be here if you didn't turn yourself into more of an active listener. There are gray areas in our world, right? Not everything is absolute. You like policies because you can point to a policy and say, well, yeah, if it's a board policy, district policy, the answer is really pretty simple, but there's lots of different things factors that go into decisions. So allowing for gray can be a healthy exercise. And then we have a tendency, I'm a taskmaster as well, we have a tendency to be a little judgmental, and sometimes we take those judgments with us into an environment that, other people they look at that and they say, well, that's not quite accurate. I put a couple, and I'm going to send you these slides so that, you're probably going to want to go home and give this inventory to your spouse or your significant other, or maybe your kids, maybe your workplace. I mean, this is a fun exercise to do with virtually everybody, and I'm sorry I can't screen share. But I'll get you these so you have them. So a taskmaster, really, what part of no don't you understand? And the joke that I always like to say is that typical taskmaster will say, "Everybody hates me today," and of which somebody will say, "Don't be silly, because not everybody has met you yet." So the taskmaster has the ability to be able to really win people over. But again, in an important role. And I will tell you again, 20 years ago, you never saw a superintendent of schools that wasn't a taskmaster, because boards wanted to hire based on decisive, logical, not afraid to make a decision, good, can attract good talent, but boy, if they don't perform, they're out, and they can do it quickly. And that script has been flipped in America, not only in terms of educational leadership, but also corporate leadership. Who's strong in column one?
They're even.
Column one? Okay, good. So let's talk about you. You are the, can you hear me? The screen froze up.
Yes.
We can hear you.
Okay, so you're the enthusiasts of the organization. You're already thinking about the end of school year picnic party. You're the one that's going to take. You're going to want to know what you're doing for Christmas. You're a celebrator. You want people to connect in a way that's very, very social. And in a way that really draws people together. So you're going to be the one that's really going to. Is Julie the only one that's the enthusiast that's got a real high one or two? Okay. Yeah. So you enjoy.
My 1 and 3 are the same.
Your 1 and 3 are the same. Okay. Good. All right. So you enjoy freedom. You're very optimistic. You're very expressive. You're verbal. Some people are going to say you talk too much. I'm sure you never heard that. You live for today. You, better than anybody else in the room, accept conflict. It doesn't bother you. You can handle it. You don't get mad. You don't hold grudges. You're courageous. You're humorous. You're visionary. And you're really excited about being on the board right now, because this is, for the next 4 years, you have an opportunity to really put into practice that which you've learned and experienced. But it's going to be about people, and you're going to make sure that you do that has to be a big part of your experience. Because if it isn't, then this is not going to be a good 4-year journey. So visiting schools, speaking to Rotary clubs, and meeting with the public before your board meeting starts. These are the kinds of things that you're going to like, because it's fun. Now, I will tell you, you're going to love going to national conferences, because, boy, 1, it gets you out of Phoenix. 2, you get around people, and again, you get your energy from people. But here's the problem: if we send you to national conferences, you come back and want to do everything that you've experienced. So you will have a tendency to drive the superintendent crazy with your over enthusiastic. Have we thought about this program and that program, and these are the things we need to do, and why can't we do this? Not a negative thing, but just something that we all need to recognize and realize about you. So you're the party planner on a staff, and Dr. Menzel, I would say do this with your executive team, because this is a fun way to just kind of frame up the people that are even around your team. We need you. You're the cheerleaders. You're the ones that a superintendent may come to and say, Julie, here's something I want to bring or introduce to Scottsdale. You're going to be, your first answer is going to be, yep, I think we can do that. But we're going to need the other people in the room to really finesse it, to make sure that it's something that's worthwhile for all of us. So what do you need to work on? Well, everybody in the room, you're probably the worst listener. And, that's just your nature. You're going a mile a minute. You're thinking about, the next way to celebrate people. You're not very detail oriented, no offense intended, but, fortunately there's other people in the room that are. Your enthusiasm sometimes can be a turnoff to others, that, even particularly in the heights of stressful moments, highs and the lows. I will tell you this, with enthusiasts on a team, they are, for the most part, sunny side up almost every day. But boy, if they go down, they hit a low, you will find that it really is tough. I mean, they're dealing with something very, very serious. So the enthusiast is, the person that comes to the meeting every day thinking, all right, here's another board meeting, here's another opportunity to have a little bit of fun, and we need you. My screen is frozen again. I hope I'm not as I'm talking to you. So that's, am I close with you, Julie, on that one?
Bingo.
Okay, good. All right, let's look at column 4. We'll just make sure. Yeah, who's column 4? All right, so Zach, column 4 is, you're the analyst. Can I ask what you do for a living? Zach?
Financial advisor.
Okay. You like spreadsheets?
Necessary evil.
All right, so look at your new colleague. Don't try to bluff them with feel-good stuff that isn't backed by data, right? He's just not going to go for it. So he needs proof. His proof comes in, what he's able to look at when he's looking at a PE of a company that he's getting ready to advise his clients to buy. All right, so here are the characteristics. Very practical person, very reliant on facts, tremendous desire to please others. The financial advisor in him is, well, I tell you, all your clients should be happy this year, right? I mean, it's been a fantastic market year. Deals with exactness. So while Julie will take an estimate and say that's close enough, Zach's not taking an estimate. He needs to know. There are no issues in your world. That's a New York term for, an estimate. Deals with great detail. Whenever I do this, I actually speak about this an awful lot to large and small groups, not only in Lincoln, but around the country. These are the deep thinkers who ponder everything, and you can see it in their expression, right? So they are, he's listening to everything that I'm saying right now, and he's trying to determine, how much of this is fact, how much of this is fun. But at the end of the day, Zach's going to take it all in. And were you first born, Zach? I couldn't see the hands go up.
Second.
Second born. Well, you're a perfectionist. I mean, by virtue of the fact that you're an analyst, you'll always act professional. These are the people, by the way, that you'll see even on your teaching staff. They're not going to dress down on dress down days, primarily because they don't want to be seen in jeans and a collared shirt. That they're always going to act and represent themselves true to their profession. You struggle with off-key humor, so Julie, be careful. Any of those jokes that you like to tell, he may not take very well. And the caveat with Zach's going to be, just joking. Very logical, very cautious.
Already done that.
Low key. Julie's gonna sing the national anthem at the first homecoming football game because that'd be just a great way to connect with people. And if we put Zach in that position, you're not gonna like it, are you? These are low key folks. They just want to support the mission. They want to do the right work. They don't really want the credit. The credit is not why they came into this. Very concrete thinkers, and I'll tell you, when you have that first packed board meeting and over an issue, and you're going to have them. I mean, we're going to talk about, that. I mean, everything that you're doing today is just beginning to practice for, what's going to be coming your way. Just know this, these are the concrete thinkers and the most cool-headed people. So Zach's going to be the least likely to be uptight about the packed boardroom. I'm not going to like it the first time, Zach. I'm going to promise you that. Julie, you're going to engage it. That's going to be kind of fun for you. Boy, all these people at the board meeting. What are these? Why do they have torches and angry looks on their face? And you're going to try to win them over because that's what you do. You're able to disarm people. So here's the issue with you, Zach, and anybody else that has this. You're a little bit too demanding of detail. And, you're going to have a lot of questions, I'm sure. And if you haven't already, you spent the most time of all the 3 new board members really researching what this is going to require. And honestly, that's satisfied you, but you're going to ask a lot of questions in the boardroom. And that's going to make the team better. And it's a healthy exercise, but others around the table are going to say, okay, we already answered that one, or, boy, that's getting a little bit too much in the weeds. And you're going to have to learn that there's going to be roles and responsibilities, and there's going to be some trust with that. You're a bit of too much of a perfectionist, and here's the funniest thing about you: we can't take you out publicly because you're a bit of a social step. So it's one of those things where when we go to the national, I hope you're laughing at that one. You're just that social scene is not your thing as much as it is for Julie. So when you go to the national conference, Julie's going to find a good restaurant and the places to go, and let's get the formal stuff done, get to the informal, and you're probably going to want to go back to your hotel room and read all the things that you learned at the sessions that you attended. So close, Zach?
Somewhat. My wife keeps me
Okay.
in check on the going in the weed stuff, so.
What she does? Good.
Yes.
Good. Well, I think your colleagues are going to keep you in check on that too. But they're also going to recognize the fact that the questions that you ask are designed really to make everybody better, to make better and more sound decisions. Because one of the things that you are not going to like is making a bad decision, and I'll be honest with you, decisions are really difficult to make for any board, but when you make a bad decision, there's always a price to pay. So I think your colleagues will look at you and be grateful for the fact that you're trying to make the process better. You're not trying to stand in the way of the process. All right, let's talk about the last one. Who's column 4?
Column 2, I believe we're on.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, column 2. Who's column 2? Dr. Menzel, I didn't see which one you are.
I ended up being number 1, although there's a fair amount of 3 in me, but, 1 was my dominant.
All right. Which, by the way, the enthusiast and the taskmaster seem to get along the best, and column 2 and column 4 will sit together in the lunchroom as well, too, because column 2, these are the mainstays of the organization. So who's column 2? And again, my screen is frozen, so I can't see.
It's Libby who is column 2.
Libby. Okay, so Libby, let me start with a question. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in the Midwest, in
Where are you from?
Indiana.
You're from Indiana, okay. Have you, I asked that question because the mainstays are the people who on a team or an organization that they dislike change the most. And so when I'm working with groups and I'll say, where are you from? I would have hoped you would say, right here, born and raised, went to one of the high schools, left for college for a little bit, but came back, and, we live in the house that our parents had, and, there just hasn't been much change because the mainstays are the people that are the most loyal to an organization. And most loyal to a family. The least likely of everybody in the room to have great separation in their lives. And so, I would basically say to you that, you're going to be the representative of stability, and you're going to be even-tempered and low-key. You're going to be even more content than the analyst with people in the limelight, and you're not singing the national anthem. In fact, a lot of times
You don't want me to.
you don't even want to. You're tolerant of others, but only to an extent. And this is more serious than not. You trust people. I mean, your first inclination is to trust, and when that trust is is subrogated, it's permanent. And so a lot of times I will say to you, and let me ask you this, Libby, have you gone back to your high school reunions?
Only a few times.
You know?
You're supposed to say it
This
hasn't
personality
happened yet.
Oh, that's right. It hasn't happened. What you reading?
Okay.
A few times.
I ask that because quite often, you know, if you didn't have a great, wonderful experience in high school, you're not going back. And it's because that's just a part of your life that you're ready to move off from. So know this, when Libby gets mad, she's going to be mad for a while. And we're going to have to work really, really hard to get her back in. But here's what she does need. She needs connection. So Libby is the one that this is the style, personality style, that's really going to relish what this group represents. You know, and so you're going to have her loyalty, and she's going to be willing to do whatever it takes to help everybody become successful. But she's really going to function best in a supportive role. She's a very private person, so, you know, unlike Julie, that's gonna tell funny stories, you're not going to get a lot of that out of Libby. And sometimes you're going to think, well, you know, she's just not, how come she's not having any fun? Well, she is, but in her own way. Most empathetic and charitable people of all the 4 styles. I mean, again, these are folks that don't like change. Change is tough, and they struggle with people who struggle with change. And know this, Julie, she's very gullible, so she's going to fall for pranks too easily, so be really careful. Again, the mainstay trusts you and ends up, you know, sometimes being disappointed when, you know, that trust is violated. They very spiritual people as well, too. So reflect on that a little bit and think about those of you that have, you know, you're bringing this to the table. And let me just give you a few minutes to just do a reflection and, you know, talk about, or anything you want to talk about, you know, the strengths that you have and what you bring to the group. And, you know, maybe share whatever you want to share. Let's take 5 minutes now and just give you a chance to react and reflect to this.
Do any board members have any comments?
Of course. So I always find these personality style inventories interesting and really make me, like, first time I go through and I just like check it quickly. And then I go through and I go, well, maybe I could be a little bit more of that. And I think that the second thought I have is I realize that I need those other characteristics to function in different environments. You know, we've done those colorizations and you compare it to other staff members and students. And I've always found it very beneficial to know the different characteristics of others I worked with, because I realized then that I may need to give a little bit of who I am in order for the group to function well. So I'm very aware of my characteristics, and I realize in some situations they are great assets, and in other situations, or according to other people, they might be detrimental to what the task is at hand. So I have, over the years, I've realized I have to kind of alter who I am internally, like most comfortable, in order to just function well in a group.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other comments
Thank you.
or input? Well, I think I will echo those comments. You know, at the end of the day, I think we're all more than a piece of paper, and this is a really good starting point for seeing kind of how each of us are. And I'm a firm believer that everyone has a role to play in a team, and we are a team at the end of the day. And that's what makes us great, and that's how we're going to achieve quite a lot. And it's great to have analysts on there. It's great to have really compassionate people. It's great to have leaders on this board, And I think all of that really comes together to just create a great team. And I'm really thankful for everyone here for doing that.
Thank you.
I would just add, it's to the points that have been made, I do think it's helpful to know how people are wired, recognizing that not everything is reflective of everything, because we're all, we have different levels of strengths and inclinations in any one of these areas. But it's helpful as a superintendent to kind of know how you're wired. And I think it's probably helpful for you to know how I'm wired as a perennial optimist and someone who also appreciates humor. So when I thought about the prank, I'm like, oh, that's good to know. Because I think laughter is really important. We deal with a lot of very difficult and challenging topics, but at the end of the day, there's something about being able to laugh together, roll up our sleeves, work hard, and just appreciate that we're in this together. So it's good for me to know a little bit more about you that way. And the other part that we'll learn over time is that we'll build the relationship and we'll understand more of the nuances in terms of what you need from me in order to be successful in your role as a governing board member, and vice versa, what I need from you in order to be able to do my job well. So I think this is just really helpful as a starting point to understand a little bit more about each of the people on the governing team.
Just to the point of pranks, I always tell people I had to marry my sense of humor. So when you meet my husband, you will know that's true.
Are there any other further comments or input?
Zach's analyzing this.
Is that, I must admit, mine were relatively pretty much even, other than for column 4, where I was slightly higher. And I think the comment of analyzing whether any of this is real or not is exactly correct for me. I don't know if board member Lindsay feels the same way, but it's certainly one of those things. But at the same time, so much of it seems so accurate. Okay, then. Well, we can move on then.
Okay, great. So, just keep this. This is just, again, a fun exercise. But one of the things that I'd like to challenge you with is, if we can go to that next slide, then I'm just going to work off of the copy that I sent you. Who's ever doing that?
Are we able?
So I'm all the way through. Yeah, it's called Developing High Performance Teams.
It's coming. They're working on getting it up on the screen.
Okay. Yeah. So one of the things that, again, I'm going to, it's slide 15. There it is. One of the things I challenge you with is team building is incredibly important, right? You're going to be engaged in some of the most important work in Scottsdale, if not the most important. And your ability to continue to forge your bond is going to be essential and really integral in if you're going to be able to continue to do the work that you want to do. So here's what we know about high performance teams, that the work takes commitment. It isn't just come to a meeting, make the decisions that you have to make, take whatever flack is coming your way, but it really takes commitment. I mean, I mentioned to you before, my wife is a mainstay and I'm a Taskmaster enthusiast, and we've been at it for 44 years. We got a daughter that's she's an analyst mainstay, and a son that's exactly like me. And it's been, we look back on it and realize, we just had to work at it as not only a couple, but also as a family. And that, it's so important to do that. And that's the same thing with you as a unit. It's going to take a commitment. And one of the things that I always highly recommend to districts that I work with or have worked with is doing at least an annual retreat where you team build and you just step back and you reflect on last year's work and start thinking about next year's work. And that includes, an evaluation of what went right and what didn't go right. And you're in a little bit of a sweet spot right now because you haven't been at this very long, but it isn't going to take long for issues to emerge. And those are going to be, challenging for you. So if you don't spend time getting to know each other, not only, in the boardroom, but outside the boardroom, then it's going to be tough for you to gel as a high-performing unit. And, no rules of engagement are established, just individual perceptions and expectations. And what I mean by that is high-performing school boards develop rules of engagement. How will you communicate amongst yourself? How are you going to problem solve? How are you going to deal with the stakeholder groups that are pushing a certain initiative? And, I don't believe you have that formalized. And if you do, I would tell you, it needs to be reviewed, and you need to brief yourself on that, because that's where you're going to get challenged and tested. Next slide, please. So underdeveloped boards just struggle the most, and they're often ripe with dissent and frustration. And I can give you a lot of examples. There's been a bunch of superintendent turnover in the Phoenix area. I think I've done all the major searches, and every district is unique. I did a couple. I did one in Pittsburgh just last year, and I can tell you, in each one of those, superintendents leave because of that, and the dissent and the frustration. And the issue really isn't about bad decision making or whatnot. It's just the inability for the board and the superintendent to really agree with each other that the work is hard, but we have to do it as a unit, and we have to continue to work until we're all, for the most part, comfortable and ready to reach collaborative consensus. And it really is centered on, your development is centered on basically three things. Where should the district be headed over the long run? Talking with Dr. Menzel this week, you're engaged a group to help you with strategic planning, and that's fantastic. I mean, that is necessary, and I was bothered by when we would engage, and this happens, by the way, in almost every district. What are the strategic priorities? We would ask staff, what are the strategic priorities of the district, or some in your community? And people say, well, I know we have them, but we don't really know what they are. Well, it's really important that people know what they are. And that has to be something, as you go through a strategic planning process, you collect as many voices as you can from your internal and external stakeholders. And then you spend time on a regular basis at your board meetings talking about those strategic priorities. The board before you, of which, Patty and Jan Michael are holdovers, the board before you created some, I don't know, 4 or 5 month goals before they were done with Dr. Menzel, and those can always be reviewed, but it really is about the longer term. So short run, we have to handle a lot of things, but longer term, we need to really focus on what are the important priorities, and then how well is the district and you performing as a whole. And there's a lot of different ways that you can get that kind of feedback. We got that feedback when we talked to your stakeholders, and it wasn't good. It was negative. And I remember when I delivered the report publicly, and there was, it was, some of that was going to sting with regard to how things were emerging as consensus items within the Scottsdale community, and the trust and the confidence was something that had been had weakened, and the issues that were there. And I remember and maybe it's still active, but respect our Scottsdale students that I started following just because it was interesting to see some of the things that were being discussed. And I understand that a lot of that's been has been softened because there's trust right now in the community with the hiring of Dr. Menzel that you're not going to go back to those days where things are happening that people are, one, not understanding, and two, really angry and upset about. If I can go to that next slide, please. So the board superintendent relationship is really the key. And there's going to be, there's already been an incredible number of superintendent resignations around the country. I see where Paradise Valley is looking for one, a superintendent, and Jim Lee, who is one of the better ones in America, who I've known for a long time, is back in as an interim. And I don't know much about that situation, but I will tell you that, there's going to be some board superintendent relationship issues that are going to be integral to that separation. And we see that time and time again. And what a lot of boards don't recognize is that, the superintendent becomes the scapegoat because it's easy. We'll make a change at the superintendent level, but underneath the superintendent, nothing's changed. The culture hasn't changed. In fact, the culture becomes more negative when there's a constant superintendent change. I was working with a board, a large urban district earlier this week, kind of an evening, just talking about some things, and they've had 4 superintendents in 5 years, and they want to know why their things are so contentious. Well, when think about your executive cabinet and the change that they have to go through whenever there's a superintendent change. And so one of the things that I try to do with any search that I've done is to basically just drill as hard as I can into knowing that there is a direct correlation to an effective system and an effective leadership team. Without a strong superintendent and a strong board, it'll take a while for what's happening in the classroom to be impacted, but I assure you it will be impacted. And so, please think about that as you continue to grow and develop. The next bullet is really pretty simple. You have 3 new board members, right? And fortunately, you have a new superintendent. I love that combination as opposed to an established superintendent dealing with a lot of issues, now having to contend with 3 new board members, because you have the opportunity to really not only date, but also, make this relationship more permanent. But what the reason there's so many vacancies right now in America is because these new board members that have been elected during a pandemic, that have heard from teachers associations, they've heard from parent groups, they've heard from business groups, that the decisions that the board has made with regard to the pandemic and who gets in-person instruction and who doesn't get in-person instruction, what are the pandemic, what do they expect? I mean, those new board members are taking out the existing superintendent. And I tell existing superintendents, and I probably have done this a dozen times, that, when that election turns, you have to go, because you can't fight through that, particularly if you've been there any number of years. And by the way, I'll just tell you, I use the year 7 as my barometer. I think in year 7, any superintendent in a district that's been trying to move the needle has to reinvent themselves in year 7, or they have to seek out another opportunity. And please don't be offended by that, because what happens in the superintendency is that superintendents who stay more than 7 years, that now have adjusted to a routine, have now become we tried that 7 years ago, it didn't work. They're not open to creative and innovative ways of doing things, and they become stale and stagnant. And then you put a board election on there or a major crisis, and all of a sudden the superintendent is looked at as the obstacle. And that's a tough pill for a lot of superintendents to swallow, because many of them move to a place like Scottsdale and they think, okay, I'm going to get the cemetery plot. This is this is nirvana for me. And in reality, there are no long-term commitments like that, because we can't control what happens much beyond that. Think about this. Year 1 is the honeymoon. Year 2 is, okay, it's time for me to develop my plan. Year 3 is we implement the plan. 4, 5, and 6 is really, okay, let's evaluate the plan. And then in year 7, it's, okay, we better have another plan. By the way, I shared this with the former board. The average tenure for a suburban superintendent is about 4.1 years, and an urban superintendent's right about 3.2. And so when you think about that, anybody that lasts longer than 4.2 has really defeated the odds. But again, the key is, how do you come together as a unit, and how is that represented to your internal staff and to your external stakeholders? And I will tell you, with a new superintendent and a new board, right now, optimism is probably at an all-time high. But you can't let your guard down. You have to continue to work to be that unit that's making good decisions. And by the way, people will respect decisions that draw fire as long as they're based on the right things. And as you hopefully know now, we can't expect you to change who you are and the manner in which you conduct yourself. But we will expect, and your colleagues will expect, that you conduct yourself consistent with how you come together with operating principles and in accordance with district expectations. So, next slide, please. All right, so this feeling of you're going to become a unit, you're going to work hard, you're going to trust each other to the degree that you can, you're going to try to grow that trust, and you're going to continue to show your community that, yeah, this is serious stuff and they have your undivided attention. I'm going to tell you that these are the trouble spots that are going to cause your relationship to get tested. And you have to understand that this is any one of these can lead to to major disruption inside your organization as well as within your community. Social media is not going away. Decisions that you make, issues that arise, people are going to express strong opinions on that one way or the other, and you can just look at them: personnel, hiring, firing, reassigning. Some of you with kids in school, you already have a judgment as to who are the really good teachers and principals and who aren't the really good teachers and principals. And sadly, you don't really know what to base that on other than you compare one to the other. And sometimes board members want to jump into personnel thinking, Mrs. Crabapple, the kindergarten teacher, should have been removed years ago. Why is she still here? Well, there's things about Mrs. Crabapple that principals know that really a parent wouldn't be privy to. Taxation and budgeting, prioritizing expenditures. I remember when you went through the Red for Ed, and your teachers are very low paid across, and so are your administrators across the country. But it's about sunshine and warmth and growth. But you're going to continue to be funded in a way that you're going to struggle. And taxation and budgeting are issues that people have. Your overrides. I forgot if we call them overrides, but whatever those referendums that you have to do to get additional funds, those are contentious, and you'll automatically have a group of people that will dig in opposition to that. And I know there's at least one district, I think it's Peoria, who I work with. I mean, they've just been struggling to try to get those additional dollars. And that's going to be tough if you get to that point when you need it. Evaluation of people and programs. For those of you new to the board, you are going to be sued, and you're probably going to be sued a lot. And much of it's going to be in the area of special education. Litigation is, the bigger you are, the more a part of the work that you do. Chain of command, and I want to emphasize to you that you're getting new board members. You're getting phone calls now. People are excited that you're there. They're going to want you to solve their individual issues, whether You know, it's their son that wasn't named the starting point guard on the basketball team because the coach plays favorites, or, you know, it's the teacher that gave their son or daughter a C and they've been a straight A student all along, or, you know, the bell schedule at one of the high schools. I mean, you're getting those phone calls right now, and I can't emphasize enough how important it is to follow the chain of command. You can't solve people's individual issues and a formal chain of command policy, if you don't have one, or procedure, is really important, and it needs to really, it has to begin at the classroom level. And it needs to work its way through building administration before it gets to central office and ultimately the superintendent. But there's nothing wrong with calling the superintendent, and I would encourage, call the superintendent. Say, I got a phone call the other day, a little bit disturbing, but you have to follow chain of command, because teachers deserve the respect that comes with classroom decisions, and same thing with principals. And those can't be resolved at the central office level unless they're egregious or illegal or immoral, you know, the kinds of things that are big negative triggers. So work on that chain of command. And the best thing that you can say to, this is for new board members, because I think Patty and Jan Michael have probably had plenty of experience with this, is when that friend calls you or the family barbecue, they come up to you and they say, well, I'm glad you're on the board. Here's something that's really been bothering me. First thing you say is, have you talked to the teacher? Or have you talked to the, well, I have. Everybody knows what happens when you talk to the teacher. Your grades drop at least one letter. Well, have you talked to the principal? No, the principal just always supports the teacher, and you know, they ignore parents. You have to get them back to the teacher. And I will tell you, because I've done follow-ups on this, if you follow that chain of command where you say start with the teacher, start with the principal, if you're not satisfied, then you know, talk to somebody in central office, whatever your chain of command calls for. And then if you're still not satisfied, you know, call me and I'll personally go with you to a meeting with the superintendent. And I will tell you this, it doesn't get to that level ever. As soon as you ask parents to try to resolve their issues at the lowest possible, you know, the closest possible to the situation, they haven't done it. They don't want to do it. And so, you know, unfairly, I think teachers get cast as, you know, part of the evil empire. And in reality, the parents not communicated their concerns with them. So I would just say to you, develop that chain of command and make sure that you follow that. And I will tell you, new trustees, that will save you a lot of aggravation going forward, because you have to say to your constituents, you're one of five, and you yourself, you know, cannot solve the issues. That has to be done by them. And trust that Dr. Menzel has the infrastructure in place at the building, at the central office level, to take those appeals when they occur. Any questions on that? I don't mean to go this quickly. I mean, you know, and Jan Michael, if anybody raises their hand, just stop me, and
Well,
you know, happy to talk to any of these.
If I may stop, because I think there might be a couple points that have been raised, and it might be worth just briefly discussing here. The first one, if that is okay with you, Steve, if we just have a couple points I just wanted to discuss here. So the first one that kind of came up earlier on the slide deck is our communication with the superintendent, and how we would like to see that done. Now, traditionally, Dr. Menzel sends the board at the end of every week, maybe it's a Saturday or maybe it's a Sunday, you know, just because of how busy everything is. But Dr. Menzel will send an update saying pretty much a day by day. It's very detailed. It's maybe one of the most detailed memos I ever received of what he's been doing. And that includes meetings with individuals, work that's been going on, updates on key issues like, for example, on Thursday, we found out from the AIA, or on Friday. So all of that's in there. And then in addition, every now and then we do receive a text message if there's an emergency or some other form of issue or some pressing matter. And then, of course, if you want to schedule a meeting with Dr. Menzel, traditionally we speak to Gladys and we'll set up a phone call or an in-person meeting, or you can just text Dr. Menzel and see how he would like to handle that. But because we have a new board, I would like to maybe see if there's any discussion on that point, if there's anything different, or if people have a different expectation for the amount of communications we receive from Dr. Menzel, if it's too much, too little. So I will open the floor to that discussion if anyone has any comments or questions. Board Member Beckman?
So parallel to that point, I think I'm clear on Dr. Menzel's communication, and I'm very appreciative of the detailed communication you give the board. I feel very in the know of what is going on in our district, so thank you for that. I think it needs to be said how you would like the board to communicate with staff and others in the leadership cabinet, because we have had different superintendents that prefer to go directly through them, to where you then would be the conduit and reach out to, for instance, the CFO or someone else if there was questions? Or would you like the board members to go directly to the CFO, for example, and copy you on it? Or how do you prefer that to happen?
Thank you for that question. And from my perspective, I don't feel the need to have everything go through me, but I do appreciate being copied on any communication or request that goes to any of my direct reports for two reasons. One, questions that you may have that would be best suited for the CFO to answer, they should go directly to her and she can provide the answer. But if you have a question every day, and if the questions are taking 2 hours each time to respond, then there's something else that we need to attend to. So by being included in the question, I understand what the issues are. It may help us improve our preparation so we can anticipate your questions and include that in the governing board packet so that you have that ahead of time. But I don't want to be the one who has to play quarterback and run interference on every one of those communications. So copying me is really the big thing. It's the same thing like when you visit the schools. Knowing and having the principals have the head up is really helpful, but I don't need to accompany you on all of those. I don't need to, it's knowing that governing board members are out there, what the conversations are, and then getting the feedback so that we can improve the way we're giving information to you.
Thank you.
Vice President Sinowski?
So you would like to be also included in campus visits?
I like to know when they're happening.
Okay.
Because one of the things that, and I'm not saying that it's happened here, but in past experience, I would have board members show up at a school. The principal didn't know they were going to show up. And then I get a panic call. Why is a board member here today? Should I be worried about my job? So some of the pre-planning and notice, I understand it's really important for governing board members to get out in our schools, see what's happening, have an opportunity to talk to our building administrators, our classroom staff, and be visible and engaged in that way. For me, knowing it just helps me understand, what you might see today, and then it also gives the principals an opportunity to say, hey, I had an opportunity to meet with a couple governing board members. It was a really great visit. Here's what they saw. So it's just having that transparency and what's happening there is helpful for me.
Perfect, thank you.
Any other questions or comments on the specific point of communications?
No, I think it's a great level of, being able to get information. You gave examples of things we've all received this week already. Notifications through a text or an email, and then the overall. So it's been very approachable and open. So that's appreciated. So no surprises on our end either. I really am trying to live by that mantra of no surprises.
That is really significant, and if we do that effectively, it will help all of us do our jobs better.
The second point I thought that might be worthwhile to discuss very briefly here is, as I noted earlier, a big part of this will hopefully be a more democratic or more inclusive form of agenda setting. But with that said, traditionally when it comes to agendas and the meetings we have in our work with the superintendent, we tend to receive the background information, I want to say Wednesday or Thursday if our meeting is on Tuesday. So we have just a few days with the weekend. And I wanted to open up and query whether both from the superintendent and from the other board members, whether more time is desired than that. And that way, we can work with Dr. Menzel, Julie, and I to figure out a way and work with the board to figure out a way to accomplish those goals or what is expected from that end. And then at the same time, the question that should be posed to Dr. Menzel is what he would expect of us in terms of asking for additional information, how much time is needed to put that together. So I think both of those are worthwhile discussions at this juncture, again, to the point of communication and how we work with one another. So I will open the floor to that discussion if Dr. Menzel wants to begin.
So I'm actually interested, Dr. Joel, if your experience is similar to mine, but in my now 19th year of being a superintendent, this has been a challenge in every single one of my districts. So we have the best of intentions to get a board agenda out in a timely manner, and generally the agenda does get out in a timely manner. But then there are things that surface that need to get added to the agenda, so often the agenda is amended. In terms of background information, because all of our people are so busy all the time, even though we've established those expectations, and Gladys is doing an amazing job of reminding people of when we need information, still sometimes that doesn't come in until like a Friday, and so then we update the packet. You still have the weekend to review it, but it's not as early as we would like. And the challenge is sometimes there are items that absolutely have to be addressed, and so it's not like I can just say, well, wait till the next meeting because 2 weeks from now might be too late. So, but maybe you found the secret sauce to fix that problem, and I would love to know what it is if you have.
Well, here's the secret sauce. 34 years I've dealt with all that. So we do our agenda planning on Thursday morning for a Tuesday meeting. It's myself, the vice chair, and the chair, and my team, and we do our best to anticipate everything that needs to be covered. And then, we are really good about not adding to the agenda. Only if there's an emergency bid, if there's an emergency action, litigation or anything like that. But it's pretty rare. But when I got to Lincoln, it was happening all the time. We were constantly amending agendas. And I have to tell you that the more agenda amending you do, the less confidence people have sometimes, depending upon what gets added to the agenda. So you're not going to be able to change that overnight, but I think you have to work toward as much consistency in your agenda planning as possible. And I don't know what your rules are for individual board members putting on agenda items. I know every district has a different policy in that regard. But whatever that is, adhere to that and know that additions to the agenda as well as deletions will sometimes, your watchdogs will raise an eyebrow to that. So we've done a pretty good job in Lincoln of planning it. And, we take about an hour and a half Thursdays before the meetings, and our meetings go off very, very well.
So that is in fact, again, traditionally, we schedule the meetings on a Monday or Tuesday the week before the actual meeting occurs on Tuesday. So there's a little bit more time. But just any comments or thoughts on this? Board Member Beckman?
So just kind of going back, because we're talking about two different things right now. We're talking about setting an agenda and adding agenda items, et cetera. But we were also, when we started this discussion, talking about the time frame in which this was developed so that board members had enough time to vet the agenda before it gets out there, make sure their questions were asked and answered, and is that an appropriate amount of time after the agenda is set before the meeting so that we don't overload staff and we're not surprising our staff with questions that maybe if they would have had a heads up, they could have answered before the night of the meeting. So when we originally, well, not originally, but a while back, we used to have our study session, as you guys know. It used to be on a Thursday night, the first one of every single month, and that would be pure study session. That would go just discussion items, board members would ask questions, et cetera. Those things, that would be considered like first look for your agenda items. And then the regular meeting would be Tuesday. So it was literally just a couple days later. After much discussion from the board, we deemed that that was not enough time because the board members were not getting their questions answered. People were frustrated because then the meeting would be on a Tuesday, and a Tuesday morning, a board member was calling the CFO, asking him to run a report based on something that was on the agenda, taking him away from what he needed to do that day. So it was just it was too crunched. So then we moved it to the 2 meetings separated by 2 weeks. And we were hopeful that that would give everyone enough time to vet not only the agenda and set it itself, but to get the questions answered from the board members and to get the items actually researched and the presentations developed and appropriately put on. So I would, give Dr. Menzel the floor in saying with Dr. Joel, what do you think is the best approach? Because you're interfacing with all of us. Where do you think support is needed as far as time, more time, et cetera, to have a meeting be comprehensive and go smoothly and not have 4 hours where there were things that maybe if we would have had this stuff done before, we could have been a little bit more seamless.
Go ahead, Dr. Joel.
I just have a question. Do you use committees?
So this is also one of the changes we are hoping to make this year. We, for the first time, formed a policy committee. That was Dr. Menzel's idea and concept that he brought to us last year. And it has been, in my view, extremely successful, small committee focused, and it is my hope, and I believe that of the entire board, that we actually expand the use of the small committee system. And I believe that will help address and alleviate some of the time consumed at board meetings and lower these concerns so that interested board members can discuss what they're interested in that will be on the agenda and deal with those issues, for example, facilities and maintenance or diversity and equity or human resources, whatever those discussions are. So that is something we are looking to do.
So I thank you for that. And I will tell you, Patty, in answer to your question, that a lot of conversation, a lot of confusion, a lot of additional questions can be handled through a robust committee system. Particularly if board members have interest and expertise in areas. Like for Zach, for example, I'd be putting him on the financial committee, right? And he's going to be the one that is going to have probably the most financial questions as a new board member and, somebody that's going to really take his responsibility seriously. So I would say that a way to streamline your board meetings is develop a committee system and then trust in the committee system. And a lot of that can be hashed out prior to the school board meeting, so you're not spending 4 hours as a committee, as a committee of the whole, which quite frankly doesn't work very well. And so that would just be my thought. You could start. I love the policy committee because that's necessary, but you could have a finance committee, you could have a instructional committee, you could have a human resource committee. I mean, you could combine a bunch of them, but boy, I'd sure encourage you to move in that direction.
Thank you for that input. Board Member Hart-Wells.
I'm very supportive of the committee system to somewhat focus more topic-specific discussions, particularly if there's 2 members of the board there. I would trust that feedback to the board would be robust and rigorous, and would suggest that if we do that there be a feedback, a quarterly report, some kind of, and even if there's nothing to report, then just so state, that's fine. In terms of giving us enough time to analyze, particularly if it becomes a little, we're all doing 100% of the analysis. If we, re-situate that would be great, so there aren't as many rate-limiting steps. But the more time, the better, but acknowledging, though, that there is a diminishing return on giving us, 6 days. We are going to spend 6 days reviewing the documents, right? Coupled with, I think, the exhaustion among the administration is shared in the community, and I certainly would not want to put arbitrary, gates and timelines on the administration, particularly right now, because they're doing so much work off hours that I wouldn't want to just kind of come up with something that, and then be dogmatic about enforcing it on day one or whatever that is. So just to add not that you're suggesting that, but we all keep in mind that we're all a little fatigued right now. And so putting together a framework of committee systems to not let that process become, overly burdensome.
Thank you. Board Member Beckman?
Yeah, I just have a quick question. As I'm trying to stay on this, how we're supposed to stay in the vein of Dr. Joel and what this meeting is supposed to be. Regarding committees, Dr. Joel, Dr. Menzel, we've had some input from our community members that governing board committees or superintendent committees. And obviously, governing board committees have to be publicly noticed, have to keep minutes, have to follow open meeting law. But there have been community members that have brought up that those are actually the more transparent way to go. But I understand how cumbersome those can be. So I would love a dialogue with all of you regarding these committees, because we started to go down this path. What do you propose, pros and cons?
Well, I'll allow Dr. Menzel to start on that first, unless you would like me to start.
You can start, then I'll weigh in.
My personal view of committees is that all of them should be required, whether they are formed by the board or by the superintendent, to keep minutes and to report on a timely basis to both the board and to the public. So I believe that is something that we could actually affect in policy that states whether it is a superintendent committee or a board-approved committee, that same process would be followed. The only difference being that you wouldn't have to post a notice that you were meeting beforehand. I think because these committees are so narrowly tailored that it is just two board members and a few key personnel from the district to work on those specific issues. So for example, just, if we had a finance committee, it would be potentially two board members, the superintendent, our CFO, maybe our legal counsel, and maybe HR, just as an example, to discuss whatever those issues are. We're not actually inviting members of the public to attend them or to participate in them, really, unless there was some reason that was needed. So I think the board should probably not go down the route, in my view, of formalizing every single committee, because then there's not only going to be an expectation that there are notes taken, but that they're posted, that they follow standard rules of order, that they may even be videotaped. It doesn't really work for the type of discussion occurring. Dr. Menzel?
Well, I would agree, and I would add, the charge of the committee is really important. So some of this is operational in detail. It's the work that we have to do every day. And some of it is policy. And one of the reasons why, in my perception, our governing board meetings have gone longer than some would like is because we're asking questions to make sure that the public understands the thinking and the rationale that has gone into a recommendation that's being presented. And so because they've not been privy to those conversations that informed the decision that was being made, our governing board has taken a position of being very deliberate about raising those questions in our public meetings so the community can understand. I think there probably is a role at some point in time for board-established committees, but I think that should be very specific based on a particular issue. Jan Michael's absolutely right. We're, with all of the posting requirements and all the rest, every time we prepare, because we meet every 2 weeks as a governing board, once one meeting's done, we're immediately beginning the preparation for the next meeting. And it takes a lot of time for everyone within the organization who's responsible for agenda items to put together the background information to prepare for the board. If you overlay on that a rigid committee structure that's subject to all of the Open Meetings Act, it bogs down the work of the organization. So being very intentional when it needs to be that versus when it can be, and I will say the policy committee from my perspective has worked really well. I bring in the people on our team that need to be there for the particular issue that we're discussing. We have the conversation and go through in detail, but it's really detailed work that then comes back to the governing board. You review it. It still gets 2 readings at the governing board table. So we haven't circumvented the transparency required in Open Meetings Act, but what we have done is allowed that more thorough vetting with my staff work that we do anyway when we look at it, but with two more sets of, or four eyes, two more board members that are participating in that process so that we bring back the best recommendation for board consideration.
So one comment, if I can, and then we can move on. You brought up something that was critical, and thank you for that. As I said, I know that board-directed committees are cumbersome. However, you said that currently, the meetings sometimes are lengthy because we discuss everything as it relates to the recommendation. And I know the efficiency in having the committee right now, or developing the committee, would be so that we wouldn't have all of that length of time. So I would ask if there is the committee that is developed in each of these areas that, and maybe this is what you're already thinking, that there is a discussion about how the committee came up with the recommendation that is transparent enough so that our community can hear how this recommendation was come to. Because what they don't like is committees that are established by the superintendent, put together, a recommendation is made, and then all of a sudden we just have the recommendation at the meeting and no one knows how it was thought out, what the input was, how we got there, et cetera. So if they're not going to be open to the public, I think we have to go above and beyond to make sure we know how that recommendation was established.
Vice President Sanowski.
Thank you for saying that, Patty. That was going to be, my suggestion is either for us to have a true study session to then evaluate what the committee recommendations are and our opportunity then to ask more questions if we have them. But I think, as Patty said, to report out what the process has been during a committee, evaluating an issue, the input, and then the recommendation. And I think that also being shared then prior to the board taking any action supports that trust and confidence which has been lacking. Typically in committees in SUSD, it's been large, and then I think committee members have felt like they've accomplished and come up with results, and then prior to board decision, a recommendation was made that was not part of the committee work. So there was a discrepancy between the committee's work and the recommendation. And that's where we fell flat on trust. And then we fell flat on confidence. And that has been a practice in our district for a long time. So I love this fresh idea of a focused attention on issues, research done, recommendations, expert opinion, recommendation to the board. And that becomes part of how we make the decision by giving the trust to the experts. Maybe we're part of that as well. And then it becomes clear to the community, it's not just us making the decisions for the entire district, but it's very thoughtful and it's very inclusive.
Well, and one last thing, I mean, even the previous board, we brought this up a few times, that it would be great to see in these committees that get made up for whatever it is, like the bond committee, whatever we decide to make a committee for, that minutes get posted. It's, that's always something everybody agrees on, and then it never truly gets done in a timely fashion, or it just starts out well, and then, so I would ask that at a minimum.
Vice President Sanowski.
And that could be part of your report out to the district in your superintendent notes. As
Right.
progress in overseeing charges of the district. And I think that's a great idea to include, and maybe it's in a link to a document or something simple.
And I agree, minutes should be posted. I think the balancing act that we all have to consider is we have a lot of people in Scottsdale who want to be on a lot of different committees. And just in order to be able to do the work of the district to educate our students, we could meet in committees all of the time, and I'm pulling away people from doing the work. Right? I can't teacher participation in committees can only happen at certain times without impacting what's happening in the classroom. So I'm either pulling a teacher out of a classroom and needing a sub in there, or I'm doing it before or after school, which also takes away from teacher time. So finding the right balance is one of the things that's pretty critical. And then having the size. So you mentioned the bond committee, for example. So one of the things that would be really within the purview of the governing board for future consideration is the process for appointing people to committees, whether it's a superintendent committee or a board committee, thinking through how do we ensure diverse representation across our 5 learning communities, across different stakeholder groups within the district. Because one of the concerns I've heard raised is it's always the same people, which is then why you always get the same recommendations. And then also being clear, committees, do they have decision-making authority or not? If we've delegated committees to make a decision, that should be clear. Otherwise, committees are bringing their best thinking forward, but ultimately the decision-making rests with the governance team here when we're allocating public resources and making directional decisions for the district. So clarity around that's pretty critical when people are asked to contribute their time in that process.
Well, one last thing, and this is timely, and I appreciate this discussion because this somehow has come up recently, but I just have to make a comment because I feel strongly about this. One of the reasons our community is all jostling to be on these committees is because they don't feel that there has been transparency around the discussion that has taken place in the committees. So you have community members not knowing what was said, and so here's the recommendation. So therefore, they're saying, I want to be part of that because I want to make sure what is important to me is brought up during these committee meetings. So if we had that transparency where we saw the minutes, we knew the questions that were raised, we knew how the outcome happened, and people could see what was important to them was actually raised, and then it was vetted, and this is the outcome, I don't think we would have that many people saying, put me on it, put me on it. They never put our people that think like us on these committees. So again, to that transparency, minutes, being very open about it, I think it's incredibly important.
And input, and for people to allow, to allow people to have input if they have it on a particular subject.
Board Member Lindsay.
I mean, I second all of this. I always want to err on the side of transparency and openness. As a parent, talking to other parents is always the constant complaint. The same people get picked over and over, and they get really upset with that. Even with the other night with the, with the committee to be formed, got blown up with parents. Everybody wants on that committee, so we just have to be very open and transparent how we pick people. Maybe have a link on the website who's on the committees. But even with the employee committees, there's been a lot of complaints on lack of transparency with like the teacher handbook committee. There's no minutes posted for that. They come, we vote on it, and then you hear from teachers, I didn't know anything that was said in that meeting. So just always want to be open with everybody.
Just very quickly, if I may, I think it's very clear that there's a lot of interest in this discussions, and it is obviously within our remit today because we are discussing how we want to work with our superintendent and set out our agendas and deal with these issues. But I think because we are on somewhat of a time limit today, that this would be a matter that could be best discussed perhaps at one of our upcoming board meetings, maybe something to be discussed on the 19th so that we can get work underway on it. But I will call on Board Member Hartwells, and then if there's anything else, we can probably discuss that later time. Board Member Hartwells?
That was just a nice segue. I was actually just going to turn the question to Dr. Menzel and ask you, in your experience, what would you prefer, how these committees work? And maybe that is the discussion item for the next meeting, because I would like to hear your conceptual wish on how you'd like to implement these committees, whether they're working groups, small, large. I just would caution, we don't want the committees to take on a life of their own. And to Patty's point, I think we all share it, that there has to be some transparency of what goes on inside these committees, particularly if they're bringing recommendations to the board. So,
Right.
I trust that you understand all of that. So we'll look forward to hearing that.
Thank you.
Yes, and we can discuss this. We will put this on one of the upcoming agendas. All right, thank you for that discussion. Dr., unless any other board members have any comments or questions about communications and that type of format, I believe we can turn this back over to Dr. Joel.
Should we take a brief break for the people in the room? A couple of minutes?
Yes.
And
Okay, we will take a 5-minute break We will adjourn for 5 minutes and come back at 10 a.m. The board is reconvening at 10:04 a.m. Dr. Joel.
Yes, there we go. Okay, well, hey, great discussion. I have to tell you, I was very, very intrigued and interested in how you were going about that. I would tell you that every one of those, if you bring that slide up for just a second, please, again. Slide 18. Every one of those items, quite frankly, is something that can be incorporated into a committee structure and will alleviate just a lot of the things that you discussed. I will tell you that I worked with a district in Wyoming that about right at the beginning of this year, after a year and a half of work, they formalized a committee structure, and their meetings went from 4 hours to an hour and a half. So, I mean, it's one of those things that if you are interested in that, maybe when we get to the strategic priorities, think about the rules of engagement that I talked about earlier. And that is, if communication in committees is important, then study it. And as John Michael said, spend some time on it. You're not going to be able to do it overnight. It's not going to be a simple transition for you. And you're absolutely right. You have to do it against the backdrop of a community that's constantly throwing questions and concerns at you. So, but that's worthwhile information. So those are the hotspots. I mean that. I'm sorry. Would you go slide? I think it's slide 18. That's not the slide. So anyway, there were just a couple more items on there, and that is that it's board members with individual agendas, another hotspot. One of the things that boards will do is they will create they'll create a system by which I call it a clearinghouse in Lincoln, but everybody has a different name for it. And it's really a way to, what do you do with the board member that all of a sudden something becomes very personal to? There are extreme examples, and this probably doesn't apply to you, but it could be anything from, a relative needing to be hired to, something that is relatively secret that they don't want anybody else to know. Nothing puts a superintendent in a tougher spot than having to deal with a board member that has an individual item or concern that they'd like addressed. And again, your rules of engagement, depending upon how you go about that, can create a system. And in Lincoln, I will tell you this: if a board member comes to me with a personal item, the very first thing that I'll say to them is, just know that if this fits into our guidelines with regard to me having to notify the rest of the board, then, I just want you to know that before we start the conversation. So, we've practiced it enough that it's not an issue, but the reality of it is you want to be really careful about that. That doesn't mean board member doesn't talk to the superintendent about, something that's concerning them. But if it's a favor or, take the heat off of me and my neighbor in the district that I represent, then, those are the kinds of things you want to guard against. And then, local community politics, and you have plenty of them. So, you are a political affiliation, and politics in Scottsdale are alive and well, and sometimes they're not thinking about the school district in terms of their strong opinions. And coming off of what happened this week in D.C., the pandemic, the budget, all of those things are going to play out into drama in your community, and you have to be prepared for that. And again, you have to address it as a unit, not as an individual. So the high-performing districts, I want to just transition to that, and I don't want to kill that conversation, but as John Michael said, our time's limited, and I want to get to those strategic priorities. But this is what we know about high-performing districts, right? So if you want to be the district that the School Board Association calls up and says, hey, whatever you're doing in Scottsdale, we want some of that. Bring us a presentation, and my guess is it won't take long before you get to that. These are the staples of high-performing districts. So it's about student achievement. And that gets lost in bad political environments. And I'll tell you when it emerges, as soon as your achievement numbers go down. And when there's not a culture of trust, I told you, sometimes it's a year, 2 years, but achievement goes down. These districts that are trying to find their 5th superintendent in 4 years, they want to know why their kids are doing so poorly. Well, they have to look at themselves. High-performing districts have high community trust, positive employee morale, and you'll know that the minute you step foot into a school. My guess is, well, the morale was not good when we did the search. My guess is the morale right now is a little bit better because you've got a new leader that's making a long-term commitment to your system, got a new board. Capitalize on that, right? Don't let it slip back into where your employees don't trust you. There's a culture of risk-taking. You know, when a board is battling amongst themselves or with the superintendent, everybody inside the district develops the bunker mentality. That's basically put on a helmet, get under the desk, let the storm sweep by, let me go about doing my teaching. And, you know, somebody like Julie that's been involved with the association to the degree that she knows that, right? It really doesn't impact teachers until they see tangible evidence of the lack of continuity. But you want your teachers and your administrators to take risks, even if parents don't like those risks, if they're based on the right things consistent with your strategic directives. You don't ever want your people to say, including your central office, to say, I'm not doing it because the board's not going to like it and the committee of whoever in the community is not going to like it. You can't move the needle without taking risks. Active parent support at the school and district level for the right reasons. For the right reasons. They want to be part of a winning team. Remember this. If you remember nothing else about today, this is important. Every personality style, every single person, at the end of the day, unless they are an arsonist or a terrorist, they want to be a part of a winning team. And your goal is to create the winning team. So your next board election, people want to run for the board because they really like what's happening and they want to be a part of that. And there's some status that comes with being part of a winning team. And so that's a high-performing district. Families move there because schools are perceived to be that good. You know, one of the concerns that I remember the old board had with me was, what are we going to do with all these kids that are going to charter schools? Well, you know, you've got to be the school system that people want to come to because great things are happening. That's a high-performing district. I mentioned board members and educators sought out for state and national presentation. You know, no secret. When you're struggling, everybody in Phoenix and Arizona knows you're struggling, and it's time really now to, with this new unit, this new energy, new step forward. It isn't going to happen overnight. You know, you're going to have people that are going to say, yeah, we heard that, you know, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, whatever. The reality of it is you're committed to becoming the best again. And so it's really about how do you become high performing. And then, you know, if you're high performing, you've got a lot more people that want to apply for your jobs and your administrative positions. They want to come to Scottsdale, not just because of the sunshine and warmth, but because they want to be a part of something exciting. Next slide, please. So low performing districts. Take a look at these. Clearly, you can point, when I do superintendent searches and I work with stakeholder groups, these are the things that are just so obvious. And they're tough to accept because boards and administrative teams are working hard. They're putting in a lot of hours, but achievement's going in the wrong direction. Staff morale's bad. People are giving basic effort levels. They're not giving above and beyond. They're not showing up early and staying late and doing things for no pay like they used to because, you know, they want to make a difference in the lives of kids. Lots and lots of excuses. Boy, you know, I wish I had a dime for every time I worked with a team or a district where they said, well, you know, we got 4 kids. I mean, look at the demographics. They're changing. It's hard to retain people. We're not paying enough. Those are all excuses. Create a culture of high performance. Those go away. Blaming others for problems. You know this in your own professional and personal lives, right? A low-performing unit is one that points the finger and says, if so-and-so would just do their job better, we'd be better. That's a function of low performance. High absenteeism. You know, most teachers don't, and administrators, they don't even know how many sick leave days they have left. They shouldn't, because they use them when they have to use them. They want to be there. They want to be working with kids. But when morale's low, people have a tendency to say, how many days can I miss without, losing pay? High turnover. Association administration, aggressive and defending. When you have to defend yourself to your community, it's because your community senses that you're not high performing. Parent request for transfer, which you have. And by the way, this is not Scottsdale specific, but my guess is many of these apply to you because they apply to districts that have struggled. Board meetings tense with negative participation. The first community meeting we had with Scottsdale that I came to once we stopped the search and then we reinstituted it. I just was taken by some of the opinions that people have. High staff turnover, negative portrayal in the media, whether it's real media or not real, but print media or social media. And then board election apathy until the will for change emerges. And so what you'll see, and I just want to say thank you to the 3 new members of the board, that had to be a difficult decision because you're not coming into something that is all fun and games. This is serious business. And there's a lot of work that has to be done in Scottsdale to recapture that. So next slide, please. So if you can, and you're not going to do this overnight, and it's going to mean taking an introspective look at how you work with your superintendent, how you work with your executive team, how you work with your community, how you communicate. But when you do that, these are the things, I'm not going to read them all, these are the things that you can expect. And when Dr. Menzel, I know he's been in probably all, if not most of the schools, he can tell in 5 minutes if it's a high trust atmosphere. In 5 minutes from walking inside a school. And that's the same thing with people watching a board meeting, attending a board meeting, serving on a committee. You'll know that you have high trust when you can observe what's on that particular slide. Next slide, please. So everybody in the room today needs to know it's your responsibility. And that the important thing is that you have to establish those boundaries, those parameters, those expectations. You not only hold your superintendent responsible, who, by the way, is your only employee, you not only hold your superintendent accountable for implementing that which you've all agreed to address, but you agree to support that. Which is why I always talk about this as mutual expectation. What do you expect from, what should you expect from your superintendent? And what should your superintendent expect from you? But it has to be in sync. And so as you continue to move along, whether you do it through a committee structure or you talk about that publicly, and I would encourage you to maybe have an agenda item where you're working on these things once you get those organized in a manner in which you feel comfortable, and let the public know that this is important to you, right? That this is you're looking at committees, you're looking at better communication, because that's important. I mean, because I think you're right. I think somebody said it, Zach said it. There's just not right now in the Scottsdale community, they want to trust you, but it's going to take a long time to really get to that trust. So roles need to be clearly defined and understood, and I want new board members to really know that regardless of what you heard, regardless of what you believe, what people told you, maybe even what you read, the role of the superintendent is really pretty specific. So if I could go to the next slide, please. So these are consistent. This is what all districts search for. They really don't know how to operationalize it because they haven't experienced it. But number one is academic. If your students don't produce academically, if the outcomes aren't good, superintendent's never going to be successful. Now, I don't know that a lot of superintendents lose their jobs over academics, but I'll tell you, an awful lot of communities get upset about academics going the wrong way. And so that's number one. You know, what are the standards for ensuring academic progress? And by the way, I mean, you might set a goal today, and you won't. But you know, a board might set a goal, we want a 90% on-time graduation. You might be beyond that already. But the reality of it is academic goals don't get accomplished overnight because bold goals require systemic change. Systemic change requires lots and lots of study and ventilation because people know this about change. Single most important thing for any leader to be effective at is leading change. But if you're honest with yourself, and every adult in America is honest with themselves, nobody really truly likes change. We like routine. We like comfort levels and comfort zones. And leading change really is a tough skill, which is why strategic planning is the most important thing you can do right now. Because that gives your superintendent and your executive team and your principals and you then the license to begin to affect change. But if there's anything that you're going to get pushback on, it's even with a good planning process, the vast majority of people don't like change. So you could come up with something at the high school level, changing a schedule around or bell schedule. I'm just making this up. And I'll tell you, you'll be getting phone calls from people that'll say, you know what, good idea. Can you wait till my child graduates? Because that's just the reaction to change. 10% of your public like change, they embrace change, they really will support change. 20% of your people will do everything they can to fight change. And a good change leader like Dr. Menzel is really going to be battling for that 40 or 50% of the people in the middle. They have to be convinced that change is worthwhile and it's going to bring outcomes. But when you initiate change based on your strategic plan, you will have to be a solid unit because you're going to get tested a lot. Active in building alliances and partnerships, not only internally but externally. Bring the Board of Ed in on all those partnerships so that there's ownership. I will tell you this. Dr. Menzel is going to make you look good once you get your strategic priorities and strategic plans in place and you begin affecting that change. You're going to reap the benefits. That's our job as a superintendent, is to really work closely with you. And he isn't going to take the credit. You're going to get the credit. Or your staff's going to get the credit. Your administrator's going to get the credit. But the reality of it is you all have to buy into the process. He has to be a coalition builder, thinking about a big picture. So the less time he gets mired down in minutia that for whatever reason people think the superintendent needs to resolve, the better he can focus on the big picture. Continually communicating about the viability of education, and then being visible at community events and in the classroom. And, you know, I know Dr. Menzel's doing it. And, you know, honestly, this first year is the year where you try to go everywhere and do everything, but you can't keep up that pace. That's about that honeymoon period that I spoke to the board about last time, that you just really try to do everything you can so that people get that you're all in, and I know he's all in. So next slide, please. So that's the role of the superintendent. It's 20,000 feet in the air, right? It's looking down, but he'll get blamed for everything that goes wrong in the system. Everything. It's no different than a football coach in a game, right? Who doesn't call the plays, that isn't doing anything other than the headsets are on and because all the prep work is done, but they're going to get the blame for things that go wrong. And consequently, you're going to own part of those, you're going to own that blame too. And it's about what do you do with those things that don't work well. So here's what the role of the board is. Set goals. Single most important thing I think you do. Every year set goals. Look back at when you do your retreat, if you do it in June or May or July or whatever, look back at the goals you set last year. Bring in your admin team to walk you through the year so you get a sense for, you set a goal for something. What's the progress update? Did you meet the benchmarks if you set benchmarks? Develop policy, and I'm encouraged about, you would not believe how many school districts that I've worked with have no policy that's been revised in 10 years. And when do they realize they have a policy issue? When a policy gets challenged. And so the work that you're doing on policy is a big step in the right direction. Evaluate policy. Your school board association probably offers a service. Maybe Scottsdale has people inside the system, but I'll tell you, in Lincoln, we have, I think, 6 sections of our policy book, that 1,000-page manual. We take a section every year and we just revise it. So every 5 years, we have gone completely through all of our policy books. And we have a board committee that actually does that so that, we make sure that they stay engaged too. Hiring the superintendent, employing the superintendent, evaluating the superintendent, compensating the superintendent. Those are all important functions of the board. You have to serve your constituency. And knowing that it's so important for you to maintain that. Next slide, please. Okay, so expectations by the board. This is what you can expect. Remember I talked about evaluating the superintendent. I don't know much about the process. I'm assuming that with legal counsel on site, Scottsdale probably does a very good job of this. But I would tell you, you have to take that very, very seriously. Dr. Menzel is a leader that's going to want feedback, and it's your job to provide feedback. And again, you hire, you're going to work to retain. When you have a superintendent that's working well with you and things are going in the right direction, you have to work to retain them. I tell boards all the time, compensate what you have to get the person there, but work to retain the superintendent, assuming you want to retain them. So the expectations by the board of the superintendent, you develop policy, he implements it, he executes it. You need to see the successes of those policies. If you've developed a bad policy, superintendent should have permission to tell you that's bad policy. The board has the right to expect the superintendent to refrain from making decisions the board should make. And I think you kind of talked about that a little bit with regard to some of your committee work. Superintendent should keep every board member fully informed. Now, I will tell you, most of this and most of the superintendents I know do the Friday update, the weekend update. There might be a little bit too much in there now, based on just kind of the conversation I was catching wind of. But I think Dr. Menzel's approach is over-communicate now, and let's figure out what is the essential information. Because Julie said it, one of the things we can never afford to let happen is a surprise, to be surprised. So there's been a major police investigation that led to a teacher being taken out in handcuffs. Confidential personnel matter. Superintendent may know a little bit more about it than what they should, but the reality, and they can't tell you, but I guarantee you'll get a text or a phone call that'll basically say, look, I don't want you to hear it at work. I don't want you to hear it. I don't want you to read it in the paper. We had an incident today at one of the high schools. Here's what occurred. All that he's able to tell you. That way you're not surprised. Same thing with you. You go to a family barbecue and somebody says to you, have you heard about the petition to remove the principal at one elementary school? And you hadn't heard about the petition. First phone call you make, board chair and superintendent. Next slide, please. You expect your superintendent to make good recommendations based on your what you've agreed to and consistent with good policy and hopefully your strategic plan. Your strategic plan will drive your primary decision. The board has the right to expect the superintendent to share in the hard work and blame, although I don't know a superintendent that ever puts any blame on the board. You know, if we make mistakes, you make mistakes, you'll figure out a way to reconcile those mistakes. You want your superintendent to be on your team and not to work against you. And then you have the right to expect your superintendent to support your work. And sometimes that gets tough when it's in turmoil or there's fundamental disagreement in the way you're conducting yourself. But, you know, again, you're new at it. So here's a chance to really focus on, you know, how do you square up differences of opinion? Differences of opinion need to be expressed either privately, and I would basically put this to you now, and I think this would have avoided some of the ill feelings. I called Jan Michael last night because I wanted to talk with him about the importance of the board chairmanship. This is a role that is something that, first of all, you made a great decision, but it's the important liaison role between you as a formal board and your administration. And the board chair should be employed and called by you when there's issues that you're uncertain about. Might be a rumor that you heard, might be something that you've heard, and maybe it's something that's made you uncomfortable. Maybe you attended a board, maybe something I said today about Jack he didn't like, and he's so polite, you know, he isn't going to say something to me, but it's bothering him enough. I would suggest you make a phone call to Jan Michael and basically work it out there. And then the two of them decide, you know, if that something goes to the superintendent, does it need to be addressed by the entire board? Because here's where I'm going with that. You can't let the disagreements fester into flat out not wanting to work with each other. Because when you do that, you will immediately go from working toward high performance to becoming low performing. And the person caught in that crossfire is your superintendent. And so it's incumbent upon you, and I certainly hope, without asking for a formal pledge, that you'll agree to that, and that Dr. Menzel will agree that he'll do everything in his power to support your work. Next slide, please. All right, so here's what the superintendent needs from you. Create good policy. Good, sound policy guidelines. Not special interests. Let's not try to create policy based on a special interest group's concerns. Let's make sure that before we create policy, we step back, we fully analyze. You know, my hope is that you stay on the board for several terms, because I really do think it takes at least 2 terms to master this. But, you know, if you choose to not, you want to make sure that you hand the keys to the next person to a really smooth operating organization. The superintendent needs your support in the community, needs your support with special interest groups. And you know, I remember working with John Creekard a little bit. John was sending me some of the posts that were out there, and we were spending a little bit of time trying to analyze them. And some of that stuff was pretty visceral, but, you know, at the end of the day, we need you sometimes to get into social media or to make a phone call and say, you know, that was a cheap shot, and you don't have the information. Here's what we're working on. Because the superintendent's not going to get into social media independently. But they need your support. And then we need you to operate as a unit. You know, you're 5 people that are one. You have to speak as one. You can't speak as not one. And I'll tell you where that's going to be tested. Let's say that next month there's a key vote, controversial vote. Boardroom's crowded, social media is lit up, and you fundamentally can't vote to support the recommendation. It's a 4-1 vote. TV cameras are rolling. The Phoenix paper's there. And guess who they want to talk to about that vote? Anybody want to guess?
The dissenting vote.
They want to talk to the dissenting vote. Why? Because that's where the interest lies. So here's the test. And I'm going to let me pick on Jan Michael on this one. So he votes no. He gives a good reason for it. The vote passes 4-1. The media surrounds him. And they say, hey, tell us, why did you vote no? How do you feel about your colleagues outnumbering your vote? You're board chair. And if his response was something along what I'm about to say, you become high performing. I did my best to influence the vote based on the research that I did. But this board voted to support that, and they have my full support going forward. As opposed to in a low performing district, that same person would say, you know what? I'm going to be back in 2 weeks, and I'm going to have more information and more data, and we're going to get this bad vote overturned because my board colleagues are misinformed. That, ladies and gentlemen, happens a lot across the country. That is low performance. So that's just one example, but it's how you function as a unit. And when your superintendent knows, by the way, we all want 5-0 votes, right? Your community critics think 5-0 votes mean you're not doing anything. We need a little agitation. So the 10% of the people that just feed off of that negative energy, they're this is too boring. Stop with the 5-0 votes. We're going to get board members in there, going to mix it up. But 90% of your people want to see consistency centered on good decision making. And you always have to tell yourself this. The squeaky wheel is the most vocal, but the silent majority is where your support lies. And that's a hard one to remember when the people showing up at the board meeting are the ones that are representing the minority opinion, but they are the minority opinion. Next slide, please. Okay, school personnel. I talked about that as a trouble spot. If somebody brings you an issue about somebody, you have to get to your superintendent and Dr. Menzel, if you want to set up a different system in place, that you cannot get involved in personnel decisions. And it doesn't matter what state you're in. If you try to solve personnel decisions, you're asking for, well, first of all, you're putting the entire board at risk, and you're asking for litigation. And you need to just divest yourself of that and say to that person, even if it's a family member or a close personal friend, you say, hey, we have a system in place, do the system. And, I'd like to tell you nobody's ever going to get terminated in Scottsdale, but that's probably not going to be the case. And it's rare that that a person being terminated doesn't go to a community group with their version of the story that can't be countered by fact because the organization, the school district, is bound by confidentiality. So know that, and you will be approached by personnel issues. One of the things that I know Dr. Menzel's thinking about, because all first-year superintendents do, the organizational chart is an example, right? Building administrative positions. One nice thing you get as a first-year superintendent, you get to evaluate people. You get to visit with people. You get to figure out, okay, year one is really about learning, but year two, I've got to get the right people, to quote Jim Collins, in the right seats on the bus. Well, not everybody's going to agree with those decisions. And it's going to spill over to you, particularly if that was past practice. So keep that in mind. The superintendent needs to be protected against unwarranted demands and excessive or unfair criticism. And just like Dr. Menzel, shared before, a question to the CFO, that's routine. But if it's a 2-hour research project, then I would suggest that you put in some procedures and guidelines where the rest of the board knows that the CFO is, it's been requested for a major research project. And I can tell you, when I got to Lincoln, we had to get that one addressed almost right away. We just could not keep up with that volume. So if we have a school board member that has a major issue that they want addressed, it has to go through the clearinghouse that I talked about, which is the board chair and the vice chair and myself. And then fair, timely, and honest evaluation. I know Dr. Menzel, I'll speak for Dr. Menzel, he's not looking to be superintendent of the year at the end of this first year in Scottsdale, but he is going to be relying on feedback from you, whether it's formal or informal. If there's you talked a little bit about communications, you'll talk more about that. If there are some things that you'd like to see changed, communicate that. And I think it's a good idea, really, until you get more established, to go through your board chair with Dr. Menzel. That would be helpful and constructive. Next slide, please. So, next slide. My screen's frozen again. Can you all still hear me? Yeah, okay. So the next slide, you have it in front of you. Effective superintendents, how do they lead? Right, this is, in a lot of ways, can be, it's the slide before that, yeah. It's envisioning the ideals for the district, setting personal goals. You're going to want your superintendent to set personal goals, and then assessing those achievements. My guess, my sense is that Dr. Menzel is working, not only is it something that's important to him, but it's also something that's going to be important to him to have his reports do as well. You want him to stay physically and mentally healthy. So, you know, one of the things you're probably going to have to insist that he does is take vacation, and to step away from time to time. And I'm not good at that myself, but I'm quick to tell other people we have to. If we're not right, we can't lead right. Personal schedule maximizes effectiveness. Participating in professional growth activities. That would be local, state, and national, and I think Scottsdale's got a good reputation for that. Highest standards of moral, ethical, and professional conduct. And just know this, you know, there's a human side to Dr. Menzel, right? There's a side of him that's, I'm sure, personal, like it is for everybody. But boy, just like when you walk into a school now as a board member, you're viewed differently, Julie. It's not going to be the same as it was when you were a teacher. They're going to look at you now as one of them, perhaps having moved to the dark side, even though initially they're going to really hope that you're going to carry forward the educators' values. But when your superintendent's out in the community, they're always being evaluated. And so letting hair down is something that, you know, high performing superintendents are reluctant to do. And then being a good listener and exchanging ideas. Next slide, please. Equitably dealing with all members of the district and the board. You have a right to expect your superintendent to treat you equally. Now, the primary work goes through the board chair, right? So that's, you know, there needs to be a direct contact, an initial contact. And here's how that might look. Had a situation at the high school today, Jan Michael. Is this something you think the board needs to know about? Yeah, I think it does. Let's contact the board. But Jan Michael is your conduit. I'm sure there's several ways that Dr. Menzel can get a hold of him. But the reality of it is, each of you has to be an equal member of the team. And so, yeah.
Oh, sorry, Dr. Joel, I believe Board Member Beckman had a question.
It was just kind of
Or
on the,
comment.
I don't know how you want to take questions, and I certainly don't want to interrupt. But it was relevant to the last slide. I just want to give Dr. Menzel this opportunity to talk to his expectation, because this is going to be coming from personal experience, because I am guilty of ferreting out when he's available. And since I'm an early morning person, whoops, sorry, secret's out, I know I can get him super early. So I want you to talk to kind of, you know, we talked about emotional health and wellness, and you are a workhorse. You will take calls and emails at all times of the day, and I've even spoken to you on Sundays, which you always seem so gracious. But I am going to give you the opportunity right now to say optimally when and how you'd like to be communicated with when it's not an emergency.
Thank you for the question. I'll say yes, I do see the job as 24/7 in terms of availability, but I go to bed early and I rise early, so it is easier in the morning. If it's a non-emergency situation, early morning before the regular day starts is not a bad time, or even at the end of the day when the meetings generally are done, because I can give time to it. During the course of a day, there are so many things going on that it's hit or miss. If it's more urgent and you send me a text, then we can figure out when we can slot that in. We live in an environment with the pandemic and other things, but actually in a community with high expectations, that if we let something fester over a weekend, if there's information out on social media and we need to address it, I don't want to wait till Monday to address it. So I have no concern about being contacted. I hope that if it's not urgent, you know, a text alerts me to, I'm looking at my email, but not as frequently. A text lets me know I'd love to be able to talk at some point. If I'm out hiking, I might not see it for a couple of hours. But generally speaking, I'll see it, and if I'm not available to talk, I'll give you a time when I am, and that works for me.
Okay, so do you
Texting is perfect.
You prefer a text first saying, I have a question, kind of need to talk to you soon.
Yep.
Can you give me a call, or when's the window? So you prefer, you don't, just to make it clear, and so you prefer that before just a phone call to you. So the email is something for that's, get back to it anytime.
Email if you have more time.
If I need to talk to you pretty soon, like today, you prefer text? Do you have a few minutes to talk to me? I have something has come up. And then you pick windows and call, okay?
Right, it's okay to call. If I don't answer, depending on what's happening, then like, if I'm in a meeting, I generally am not going to answer a call. But I will sneak a glance at a text to say, is this an important thing or not? Or if I'm doing something else, I've not been to a movie theater in probably a year, but just assume for a second at some point you were in a theater. You're not supposed to be looking at those things, but the call I would never get. A text, if it's important, is the equivalent of a pager. So that's why it's just helpful to know whether or not is this urgent? Is it something that within the next hour or two? So I that's my preference is the text, and then I can either call right back then or find a time that's mutually agreeable.
Are there any other comments or questions? All right, Dr. Joel?
Yeah, thank you. And great question, Ms. Beckman. Thank you for that. That's wonderful, because that's actually going to be an activity I'm going to just walk you through here in a minute. So you can see the rest of them, right? These are really the basis of how you evaluate and assess the work of the superintendent, right? So it's the things that, hopefully you've got staff members and community members that have already shared with you that Dr. Menzel's been visible and open and dealing with the things. One of his big internal jobs is how does he help administrators grow and develop within the system that, they've had a couple of different superintendents in just a few short period of years. So what I'd like you to do, and we don't have to spend a lot of time on this because I really do want to get to strategic. We're going to get to strategic priorities. Is let's hear from each of you. How would you like to be communicated with if the superintendent has an item that they would like to discuss with you? And then the second part of that question, and I'll give you 5 minutes to just kind of mull this over, and we'll come back and share. What are the items today that are of the most interest to you? Okay, so two-part question, and, you know, we'd like to hear from everybody, of course, but, you know, how do you want to be communicated with when the superintendent has an item? And then what are the items that are of most interest to you? I think, if you don't mind, Michael, I think I'd like to start with the new board members first.
Absolutely. Board Member Lindsay.
As far as communication texting, I always have my phone with me. So even if it's just a text and say that you sent an email, just lets me know so I can get to it quicker. Items of interest to me is, of course, finance, transparency issues, as it relates to marketing, what policy we could create to increase marketing. It's something that I've heard a ton. And then also, as it relates to policy, maybe planning for any sort of achievement gap as a result of COVID. I've heard issues, read articles about, next year there may be kids that are held back. Their parents hold them back. Or there's, kids that dropped off the grid. We don't know where they went. They may come back, may create issues with staffing and just planning for any possibilities as it relates to COVID. So.
Good ones, thank you.
Board Member Hart-Wells.
So as at least a first, reach out. I think text is the most efficient for me, although with the caveat that I do occasionally / frequently misplace my phone. So don't take delays in responses from me personally. What are items of interest to me? First and foremost, student achievement, both positive and challenges. And I realize that was probably more of a longer time horizon. And then, particularly in light of our current circumstance, safety of everyone, whether it's, I don't care what category you're falling in there. And then heads up, and I'm sure this is true, and you've been great about this, heads up on any matters where we might be approached by a member of the public to comment. The no surprises, which has not been an issue. So, that's it.
Thank you. Vice President Sanowski.
Text works best for me. I find the computer to be a vortex of my time and with lots of distractions. So I really have to make myself sit and be in the mood to go onto my computer. My phone, I have the access to email and stuff too. But anyway, text is great. And I also use that, and don't ever feel like, unless I'm saying this is urgent, don't ever feel like anyone has to get back to me from a text. Sometimes it's just, it could be late at night. And I know some of you are not late night people. I have evolved my schedule to match my family's, and they're very late night people. So if I send you a text at 1 a.m., I'm definitely not expecting anyone to read it. It's more of at your convenience. So just kind of letting you guys know that. As far as issues of interest items of interest, equity issues for students and staff is a top priority for me, as well as rebuilding the respect of our profession in education. And to me, that means not just attracting, but also supporting, retaining, and lifting up our employees to perform as valued partners in our district. And that includes creative supporting, not just supporting, let me back up, encouraging and supporting creative and innovative ideas for us to be better than we've been. Ever. I mean, I see COVID as being nasty, but I also see it as really being a set point opportunity for us to pie in the sky dream what we want to be and put that forward. So those are issues to me. Innovation and ideas and value to our employees and benefiting our students as a result.
Spoken like a true first columner. Board Member Beckman.
Wow, now I guess I should have done mine in a controlling nature. No, just kidding. I want to know everything. No, just kidding. Well, this was, I might have walked in a little bit after the descriptor because just a little bit of disclosure. I took this to mean like, why would I want you to call me right away or whatever? And so when we're talking about the things that may be of interest or a priority to me, I see that as a little bit different than what I would expect a call from you or a text or whatever about. So I guess I'll kind of merge the two since I guess I didn't quite understand how we were to answer this question. I like a phone call. I am on email all day and I probably have 200 right now that I still need to respond to. And texts somehow have become like a shortened version of email similarly. So if for me, it's like, do you have a minute for a call? Because then that takes me 4 minutes, the sentiment is there. You can understand how someone's tone is a little bit better, so I just prefer a phone call. Academics, our student successes and, difficulties and challenges, I like to hear about them. When you get information that you think is relevant to how we're moving the district forward regarding academics, of course I want to hear about it. I always want to know if there's something out there that the community might be bringing to me because in the vein of no surprises, I think the worst thing forever for a board member to happen to a board member is to have something that's incredibly important come to you and you're caught off guard because then we just look disorganized. And new ideas, new competitive thoughts. I am very receptive to anyone on our leadership team, especially you, Dr. Menzel, to coming to me and saying, I have a great idea, I think. Let me explain it to you. I would love your support. Anytime you want to do something along that vein, I am open and almost always willing to supporting whatever it is.
Thank you. For myself, I would just say that you can email me for anything that can wait 24 hours. And of course, if it's urgent, just text or call me. And if I don't answer, leave me a voicemail so I know what it's about and I will call you back. My main focus is just given kind of the slight change in role now is really on the board reform items like the committees that we've discussed, like the transparency, policy focus, but most importantly to ensure that each of the board members here has the opportunity to either work with you to discuss the items that are most important to them, but also to have those items placed on an agenda if necessary, as frequently as possible. Strategic planning is, of course, an area of focus of mine, but we've already done some significant work in that area, and I appreciate the past board's work on that and our current administration's work on that. But beyond that, I think, of course, COVID, academics, and most importantly, finding ways to support our students and support our staff to accomplish their tasks, because this is a very difficult time. But even outside of COVID, we really need to keep that focus on our students and the people who work with them every single day. So those are my priorities and areas of interest. And again, email me for anything that takes 24 hours and text otherwise or call. Are there any other comments or questions? Okay, Dr. Joel.
Okay, very, very good. Thank you all for that. I mean, that's, when you have a reach agreement on, and I apologize, I lost my, pulling it back up. When you reach agreement on how to be communicated with, that's the first step toward developing that trust that is so important as you go forward. So I appreciate you spending a few minutes on that. What I'd like to do now very, very quickly is move to slide. I'm just going to wrap it up before we go into the planning phase. Slide 27, please.
What's the title of the slide?
It'd be high impact boards.
Is that a slide we've reviewed before?
No, I don't think, well, actually, it's the information underneath it. It's just kind of summary information.
Oh, there we go. We found it.
Okay. And is Jonathan still in the room? I can hear you, but I lost, I was trying to change applications and I lost the video.
Is Jonathan there? Kyle or Jonathan, are you present? Oh. We are working on it.
Okay. Well, in the meantime, so 25, or the slide is,
Oh, wait,
success is
apologies,
hard work.
apologies. Can you see everything now, Dr. Joel?
No, I can't. And I think I did something that took that away. I just don't know how to get back to it.
Are we using Microsoft Teams? Are you
I
on
am, yeah.
Are we using a MacBook or a non-Apple
I'm
computer?
using a MacBook. What I did was I shifted to a different
Tab.
PowerPoint and a video feed.
I think you might be you might just have to go through your tabs on your browser, on your
Okay.
internet browser, if you have your internet, your Google Chrome or Safari, whichever one you were
Yeah, okay.
using.
There you go. Thank you. Boy. Okay, so very, very quickly, just kind of summary. Next slide, please. All right, so I just threw these in there. You're a community volunteer. You're here because you want to give back to the community. School governance is really complex. I think you hopefully have an understanding of that. The return on investment is doing the high impact work that results in your students doing better. And then you have to learn to govern as a body. Team is the highest priority. It's like anything else that we do. If we don't work on that, we're not able to, you just can't get to that point where you're going to function at a very, very high rate. You just don't fill a seat. You really commit to a long-term arduous process. Next slide, please. Whether it's communication or decision-making or committees, I would ask you to work on, those things that are so important for you to work together. I call them operating principles, and Dr. Menzel might be aware of policy governance. I will tell you there's a district that I worked with here in the Phoenix area, Dysart, that I've never seen a district practice policy governance like they do. And it's just, and I'm not trying to highlight another district other than what I've observed, but in terms of roles, responsibilities, and how they deal with governing, it's probably one of the better models. That's national level training. But, you can create your own. I would just say, really work on that, those operating principles. And the more solid they are as you get ready to go through the school year, the better you're going to meet the challenges that are going to be coming your way. Agreeing on how decisions are made, essential roles that everybody, long and short range planning, we talked about that. Next slide, please. Okay, the 3 new board members represent culture shifts, and I would say to the 2 returning board members, John Michael and Patty, you're a wealth of information. You are veterans of the board wars, but you only have the perspective that you brought in when you were new to when the election took place. But you have to be the resources that the 3 new board members have to learn from as primary teachers, because there are no other examples. Former board members in the community may say, well, here's what I did, but the reality of it is, with all due respect to their work, it doesn't matter anymore. What matters is what this team does and how you come together. And so the 3 new board members all shared the areas that they're interested in. They're willing to become a part of the team, but they also represent a culture shift. And it won't be long before Zach and Libby and Julie become veterans of this. but I want to just underscore the importance of the work. You can change the culture with how you begin to set the framework. Don't forget to invest in professional development for yourselves on governance, and then develop plans for resistance, because you're going to have resistance. I mean, your community critics did not go away. They might have taken a rest, but they did not go away. And they've now, just like what we're seeing in the national arena, there is a subculture of people that are they're programmed to believe that whatever you do, it's not going to work, at least to meet their expectations. And I would say to you, as you grow and develop and get stronger, those voices will become fewer and farther between. I put in, hopefully you have a copy of it, and if you don't, it's not in one of the slides, but I would ask each of the new board members tonight to look through those 10 tips for the do's and don'ts for new board members. I just think if you can just read it and let it just kind of synthesize with you, that'll help you grow and develop. Nobody expects you to come on, at least I hope not, and make a motion to make a major change because of something that was either said on the campaign trail or something that you may fundamentally believe in it. Be part of the system. I talked to Jan Michael yesterday about, since Patty and he are experienced, is to really reach out on a fairly regular basis with each of you to just ask you how it's going. And maybe you start with today. How did today go for you? What resonated? And I wouldn't do it right after the meeting. I would do it, a couple of days after it's had a chance to kind of sink in. But, when you do that on a regular basis, that onboarding orientation work is, really important. You're going to talk about committees, but I would say if you ever get to the point where you do something different in your committees, make sure that everybody gets a chance to be on a major committee. And make sure that, one, you make sure that, absolutely ensure that it isn't committee assignment for life. One of the ways that board members grow is when they serve on different committees. So you might not be interested in instruction right now, Zach, but at some point you need to get better at instruction. So if instruction was a committee, certainly finance is your interest, and that makes a lot of sense, but you want to learn instruction too. Next slide, please. And I've said this before as well. Jan Michael said it in his introductory statements. Thanks for putting in a Saturday to do this. This shows a big commitment on your part and to Dr. Menzel. But figure out ways to do this. In Lincoln, we do 2 of these a year. We do a summer planning retreat that is team building. And then the pandemic, probably we won't do it this year. We typically do something in January where we get everybody together again, have dinner, and it's one of those where we just kind of do a reflection of the year, and we talk at the mid-year, and we talk about what do we have facing us going forward in the future. We're trying to do that a different way. Zoom just isn't the same as in person, but nonetheless, emphasize this. John Michael, it probably falls on your shoulders to say, let's do some team building. Let's make sure that we, spend some time together. Some boards will, if a meeting starts at 6 o'clock, they'll get together at 5 o'clock and do some team building. And there's no reason why you can't do that in the view of the public. I think that shows them that, you're working on strengthening yourself as an entity. And don't forget the social part as much as the professional part. If you get a chance to go to a state conference, don't be afraid to go out to eat and, socialize, get to know each other. Try to really get to know each other because you're about to go to war together. And, I'm a history major by nature, and I've studied, battlefield psychology, and I don't mean to make you nervous about this, but the reality of it is the more you know about each other, the more you trust each other, the better you're going to weather what you're going to face. And you are going to face. Everybody in America is going to face. Change is tough. The way we get about change is we think strategically, and that sets the stage for positive progress. You have a strat plan that's in process or will be in process. Your board and administrative goals need to flow once your strat plan is developed. Your annual board superintendent priorities should flow from that plan. Change has to be driven by vision, and realize that even the loudest group of people in your community cannot drive your change. You have to drive that change. They can participate in conversations, but they can't drive the change. And I always believe that, you can do these yourself, but it's been my experience that having them facilitated, always gives your superintendent an opportunity to be an equal participant. And then make sure that whatever we decide here, as we close her out with some strategic priorities, monitor those, articulate them, broadcast them, let people know what you did today, because that's important. Have your communications person, Dr. Menzel, just do a little press thing, put it on your website, release it to the media if you want. The board spent 4 hours on working on boardsmanship and communication. And oh, by the way, we established the following strategic priorities to drive us to the end of the school year. Okay, the rest of the stuff I think is fairly redundant. Evaluation, I put a slide in there about evaluation. One of the things that you should do, I'd recommend that you do, is look at your evaluation policy and your procedure. Many states dictate what has to be in there, but I would tell you that it's probably in due revision, and you want your superintendent to be a part of that as well too. And that's just good communication back and forth. So let me stop there before we go to the final phase and just say any questions, any comments about anything and that we've talked about or you talked about, because I'm about to ask you now to individually write down the 2 or 3 things that you believe should be the focus of this group from now till, we'll just say, the end of this current school year.
Do any board members or Dr. Menzel have any questions or comments at this time before we move forward? Board Member Lindsay.
I guess just have a question with our previous boards, with high-performing boards, how do you fight against different factions being made, board members, previously, not this board, but veering off course and meddling in things, hiring decisions, blocking hires for personal agendas? Like, how do you fight against that team building? Whose role is it to ensure board members stay on path? Is that Jan's job, Dr. Menzel? Do we all work together? Just curious how you ensure a high-performing board and we don't venture off path.
That's an excellent question, Timothy. Thank you. So, I talked about the operating principle, right? So I would encourage you to gather at some point in the future, not too far along, and really sit down and develop the framework for that, right? So, it's formalized. So it's actually adopted as a procedure on communications, on decision-making, on working with the public, working with the media. I mean, you can put in there anything you want, but the key is that it's mutually accountable, right? So if you had a board member now, for example, that was out in social media saying, we wasted 4 hours of talking about the stuff that doesn't matter, and sadly, I think that happens, and it probably has happened there. But the reality of it is, you would have a way to deal with that, right, in a private setting and or public setting. But that's why you need to formalize those operating principles. And if you have an interest in that, I mean, it's something that can be done really in a skeletal way in another 3 or 4 hour workshop. But you want to formalize it. Now, absent that, what I would say is this: work with your board chair. Work with your board chair, work with the superintendent. There's still some things out there, like former board members are being highly critical of, this is a goody two-shoes board, and they're trying to get along with Dr. Menzel, and we all know that doesn't work, and your wishes are not being represented. You have to figure out a way to counter that. And my best advice is your actions will matter way more than your words. And it's what they see, it's what they observe, it's what you message. I would tell you with your communications director, get really aggressive on the PR front. This 4-hour workshop needs to be on your website front and center. Future commitments, the 2 or 3 strategic priorities that you're going to be doing, I think is going to be good. You know, I was thinking about listening to a few of you. You know, I could have turned this into, you know, what are the commitments of this board? What are you willing to commit to in terms of your own personal or professional growth and development? So there's a lot of different ways to get about that, but let your actions speak for the words. And again, 90% of the public support you. 10% are going to work against you. There's no way of getting around that. You're going to have your critics. We all do. Good question.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions before we move forward? I will just say that, again, a lot of our policies are slightly out of date. It is an issue that the board is working on and the policy committee and our legal counsel are working on. Current board policy, BBAA, does limit, when we were discussing information requests of the superintendent or administration, to 2 hours of work. So if what you have requested will require more than 2 hours of work, which is quite a lot of work, it does require board approval. So please bring that to the superintendent or me to put on an agenda if that is an issue that comes up. Okay, Dr. Joel.
Okay, so the final activity, and I have a bad slide in there which I was trying to fix, and I apologize for that. So I'm not even going to use it. Is what is really just designed to say what do you want to focus on this year? What, you know, think about. I'm a big Jim Collins disciple, I guess, and one of the things is, you know, begin with the end in mind, right? So I want you to flash forward to, let's say, the summer, and hopefully the pandemic is beyond us. You know, what are those things that you believe that if you start working on right now will lead to success then? So we call them strategic priorities. So I want each of you to take, I'm going to give you 10 minutes to just write down, limit them to no more than 4. But what do you believe should be the focused work of the superintendent and board at this time to produce evidence that, you know, things are moving in the right direction when you gather this summer to evaluate? So we just call them strategic priorities. So it's really you as an individual, based on what you participated in today, or what you came into the board meeting believing, or what you personally believe with regard to, you know, your own experience. What should be the focus for the next 6 months? Dr. Menzel, is Gladys in the room?
No, not any longer.
I will write down the comments
Yeah, and I
made,
will
though.
too.
Would 3 more minutes be enough time? Thank you. All right, I'll give 1 more minute.
So, John Michael, like we've done in the past, I'd like to just have each trustee put one out there, just kind of go round robin style. I'm going to record them, as Dr. Menzel will as well, and then give a quick explanation as to why you had that, and then we'll just exhaust ourselves and we'll try to reach some kind of consensus.
Excellent. Have all the board members concluded writing their 3, 2, 4 objectives? Okay, Dr. Joel, would you like me to simply call on board members? Board member Lindsay, please give 1 objective.
One would be marketing, turning the tide of our enrollment losses, showcasing our wonderful programs, actually competing against the charters in the area with school choice. We have a lot of really wonderful things, and I think we can start really turning that ship around.
Thank you.
Got it?
Board member Hartwells?
So I took this as more of a in the next 3 to 4 months type of goals. That my primary would be learning acceleration to address the learning loss students.
Board member Beckman?
Similarly, evaluating and identifying learning gaps and developing a measurable plan with goals that can be implemented immediately to help our students address those gaps.
Vice President Sinowski?
To improve the reputation of SUSD within our community, including the function of our district as a partner in our community, as a higher performing district, as is evident by fewer technical, logistical problems, period.
Increase substitute pool to cover all site substitution requests without reliance on principals and administrative staff. So those are the first 5. Do you want me to continue calling on everybody till they are done? Dr. Joel?
Yeah, let's just keep going and see if there's any other ideas.
Board Member Lindsay.
Teacher retention and recruitment.
Board Member Hartwells.
It's somewhat related, but maybe more broadly, I was intending to reward and incentivize the extraordinary efforts that has been made by every stakeholder this school year.
Board Member Beckman.
Evaluate the social and emotional needs of our students as they return to our campuses.
Vice President Sinowski.
Leaders expected and encouraged to implement new ideas to support specifics within each learning community.
Would you repeat that one, please?
Sure. Leaders are expected and encouraged to implement new ideas to support their learning communities.
Train all teaching staff on use of streaming cameras and audio systems. Board Member Lindsay, do you have any more?
Yeah, just financial transparency policy with our, issues with the enrollment stability grant, for example. Just really doing a deep dive there and make sure we're well prepared for next year.
Board Member Hartwells.
Also along the financial vein here, but fiscally transparent realignment of the budget to support the goals. And I was actually thinking of the goals I wrote down, but the goals that ultimately end up on the table.
Board Member Beckman.
Similarly, evaluate budget priorities to best put money in the classroom, and at the same time, communicate with and work with our educators and staff to strengthen our relationship so we can begin rebuilding in the post-COVID environment to address both student issues that I listed above.
Vice President Sinowski.
High expectations of staff, students, and our community, as is evident by enhanced retention of students, staff, and increased enrollment.
Establish system for board listening sessions with all employee groups. Do any board members have a fourth objective they would like to put forward?
Yeah,
Vice President Sinowski.
sure. Innovative ideas are welcomed to address students' determined educational and personal needs, altering offerings such as being aware of calendar flexibility, remediation strategies put in place in order to meet students' needs, especially post-COVID era.
Do any other board members have additional objectives they would like to put forward? Thank you very much. Dr. Joel?
Yeah, so here's how it kind of shakes out with me, and like I did last time, I want time to wordsmith this. So there's one on marketing and messaging and competing against charters, and I'm wondering if maybe that isn't part of the finance study. So that was Mr. Lindsay put that one out there. A high priority is plans to address the learning loss, the gaps, and what are the plans and strategies going forward to be able to address that when you do bring all your students back, because that's going to be significant. I would say that had the most hits amongst you, so should be a strong priority going forward. The reputation piece that was raised by Julie, I think can be part of the marketing and messaging in terms of, just that's it, right? I mean, if you message well and you follow it up with actions, then you've got, you're going to start winning the ground battles. So I'm just going to pull that one up there. There's a lot on teacher acknowledgement, teacher retention, teacher awards, trying to retain the folks that you have. And I think the substitute one would fit in that student one, Jan Michael. I'm gonna, unless you disagree, I'm gonna pull that in there because I think that strengthens that one.
No objection from me.
The train the staff on technological delivery, I'm wondering, of course, that you wouldn't raise it if it wasn't a source of stress like it is in every district in the country, primarily because we were all caught flat-footed on it, right? I'm wondering if we couldn't include that with the, the retention and recruitment piece, because clearly you're going to have, like Lincoln does, teachers that, if they didn't resign when we converted to the hybrid models, they're seriously thinking about taking early retirement now, if in fact we have to do it again next fall. So if you don't mind, I'd like to include that in that teacher retention support.
No objection, and that is both the substitutes and the training on tech are key results that fall under that objective neatly.
Good. And then I'm just making my notes here so I don't forget. And then the finance deep dive, transparency, realignment to support goals and post-COVID. I think that's a standalone, even though I think that, Zach, I could argue, and you probably could too, that that's part of the messaging. The reality of it is there's a new financial reality that, a lot of us you don't know what that represents. So that's probably, really having your finance teams do that deep dive. For example, we're expecting stimulus money, right? How does that play out as one-time dollars that, are, how those going to be utilized? So if you don't mind, I'd like to have that one as a standalone, because I think that's an important one for you. And then, the communication system that Jan Michael put out there to connect with staff groups. Did you just say staff, or did you also include community groups as well?
I just said staff groups because, like Board Member Hartwell's, my focus was on the immediate 3 to 6 months. We do actually, I think the board members individually speak to quite a lot of our community members, but often it's the official communication channel with non-administrative staff is a little different.
Do you see that in the marketing and messaging piece as just part of the overall, we're going to get out there and increase our communications?
Yes and no. I think it falls under that. I also think it might be a separate issue and within our general discussion about board changes and how we work with our administration and other members within our district.
Okay, so let me see if I can, and again, I'm just trying to make this as orderly and as organized as I can. So assuming that when I write these up, I'll send them to Dr. Menzel, and then I would ask that Jan Michael and Dr. Menzel take a first swing at them and adjust them. I won't put them in priority order because I really need to be there to do that prioritization. But assuming I can get these down to 3 that are manageable and measurable, then the communication piece, that would be a great door opener for board members to get out into staff groups to talk about this, the priorities for the rest of this year. So I'd probably like to leave that as a standalone and just use that as a byproduct of the work that you did today. And I think that would be very, very good. And I have to tell you, I really want to emphasize that. The more that you can do right now on an interpersonal basis with your internal stakeholders, the greater the support you're going to have as you work through what the rest of the year is going to represent. So your next board meeting is in a couple weeks. If I can get these to you, say Monday, Dr. Menzel, you look at them, Jan Michael, get them out to the rest of the board, and let's figure out a way to wordsmith these. I'll put a couple of measurable indicators, just kind of based on my own experience that you might want to focus on. I would formalize and adopt the document and then communicate it every juncture. Put it on your social media. I mean, just say, here's what we spent 4 hours on. This is going to be the priority work. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Do any board members
All
have
right.
any questions or comments?
I have one, just because we don't have council in the room. And I need a little clarity on making sure that we're not kind of sideways taking a vote here on our priorities for the next 6 months. Because I think I know where you're going. I just need to make sure that, from what I'm hearing, we're not developing some document that we're taking to the public saying that today we came up with these priorities, since we're not voting on any priorities.
That is correct. Just as we did this last year, when Dr. Menzel first came on with Dr. Joel, we are just working in a workshop with Dr. Joel on these. He will then send over a document that we will then discuss as an action item or a discussion item on Tuesday, the 19th.
Okay, so that makes sense. So we're going to get our arms around this, and it will become an action item on an agenda that we say clearly these are our okay. I missed that piece. I thought we were circling back and saying take this now, as in these were our priorities, and I just wanted to be very careful.
I appreciate that clarification. Dr. Menzel.
I would agree with that, and I just wonder if it would be helpful to have a reminder of the 3 that were previously approved, just in terms of the framing and wording, because I think it was important to have an open review of what's on your mind as part of the conversation, but I would like to just put forward what was there, just in case there's anything that may resonate. The first was support a culture of high expectations for all students and staff in order to ensure each student is able to reach her full potential during and following the COVID pandemic environment. And there were a number of specific ideas below that, but that was the broad goal. The second was to initiate the process of long-range planning by December 31st to develop Scottsdale unified into the most impactful district in the country. We're starting that process, so probably not one that needs to roll forward, needs to continue, but you know. And then the third is identify and address financial challenges and opportunities to support the core purpose and direction of Scottsdale Unified School District. So consistent with some of the themes that surfaced in the priorities there. So those were the 3 that were approved when we met with Dr. Joel back in the fall. And in some ways they align nicely, and then there are some shifts in priority that I think will be articulated from the ideas that were put forward today.
Vice President Sinowski.
In regards to the communication PR piece, I think it is important to include our community in this, if even just to remind them of our current situations, you know, our findings, the results of work that we continue to do, our interests as an organization, as a school district, and what we want our future to look like. So giving them, maybe we don't even know what that looks like in a concrete manner, but giving them an idea of, instead of saying, we're going to be the best district in the United States, well, what would that look like? So giving them some ideas on really what do we aspire our district to look like? And I think that's a key piece of ongoing communication, PR, that our community needs to hear and be part of. I think that not knowing creates that angst in our community that we continue to feel.
Thank you. Do any other board members have any questions or comments? Okay, Dr. Joel?
Yeah, so first of all, Julie, I heard what you said, and I'm thinking that, you know, a way to get at that is, as you know, you think about what does it take to become a high-performing district? Maybe that's the ultimate objective, right? We're going to strive to become a high-performing district, and it's going to be measured by a bunch of different things that, you know, you've all talked about today. So I totally agree with you. You know, I want to say this. This has been so enjoyable for me to work with you, coming off the year and a half or 2 years that I worked in Scottsdale. I'm absolutely convinced that this group of people is going to craft a new beginning, and it's not going to take very long to get there. But you know, it's about your commitment to the process, and I know you're all deeply committed to that. And so I will take the the rest of this weekend, just kind of do some wordsmithing. I'll contact Dr. Menzel and maybe we'll work through it. And we'll get this to you as quickly as possible to wordsmith it. But the more public you make this, when you reach agreement on what this is and should be, and the more you remind yourselves at board meetings, at civic meetings, in meeting with staff, that this is the commitment that you're making, the more that's going to resonate and the greater the confidence level that's going to go up. So, you know, I was looking forward to this, to meet the 3 new board members. I'm incredibly enthused about what the future means. And, you know, I know just talking with Jan Michael last night, the commitment to getting this right and moving this forward is genuine and real. So I very much appreciate the opportunity to work with you. If it presents itself, you know, one of the things that's so important is to review this and, you know, each year go through an exercise where, you know, you refresh the goals, and as part of your team building, you know, you work through scenarios. You know, you're going to be confronted with a lot of challenges. There's just no way to get around that. I don't know what they are. You don't know what they are, but they're coming. Each one of them reflect on, you know, how was it handled? How did you feel about it? You know, what could have been done differently that might have alleviated some of the tension. And that's how we grow and develop, right? It's kind of like the tuition of life. The things that challenge us the most make us stronger. And, you know, I think with your enthusiastic participation today and your commitment in the future, I think certainly it's going to be bright for the Scottsdale students. So thank you. I'll get to work on this weekend, and I'll stay in contact with Dr. Menzel and Jan Michael. If anything emerges, you ever want to give me a call, you got my cell number. Feel free to do it, and that goes for anybody as well. So with that, I wish you the best of luck. Enjoy the rest of the weekend. And just so you know, it just clicked over 28 degrees in Lincoln. I'm thinking about going to Scottsdale.
Thank you very
Dr.
much,
Joel.
Dr. Joel.
Can I say one thing? Dr. Joel, I know it hasn't been an easy process coming from starting back then, and I want to thank you for your patience and your dedication into supporting us through this, because we are better for it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
My
you.
pleasure.
Thank you.
Before we conclude this meeting, do any board members have any additional comments or questions? Vice President Sanowski?
Comment. I would love for us, once we get these established, to post them wherever we are meeting. I know our district is really good with making signage. I think it should be reminding us and reminding our community why we're here.
Thank you. Any other board member questions or comments? This concludes the board's agenda. The chair moves to adjourn this January 9th, 2021 special meeting of the Scottsdale Unified Number 48 Governing Board at 11:45 a.m. Is there a second to the motion? Board Member Hartwell's seconds. It is moved and seconded that the board adjourn this January 9th, 2021 special meeting of the Scottsdale Unified Number 48 Governing Board. Is there any debate? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The motion carries 5-0. The meeting is adjourned.